Welcome back. Welcome back, Dr. Dr. Glenn
It's
Doyle.
amazing. It's
I'm
amazing.
very excited to have to to have the opportunity to sit down with you again. We're kind of doing some unboxing here before we ever even got started rolling, but I figured you know, I'd kind of give you a little bit of filling in of what's been going down and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Did,
I am
what have you
thrilled,
been up to? What's your update since the
dude.
last time we spoke?
I'm thrilled once again to be sitting down with the man, the myth, the legend, the comedian, the sports entertainer, the all around amazing human being that is Corey Castle. I got to say, you're kind of rocking this kind of Mick Foley, Charles Manson
Yeah.
vibe going on. This Cactus Jack Manson, if you will.
Well,
Um,
I've been doing I haven't been doing it, but I was booked to do I was
you were going
booked
to lie
I
to me
did
just then.
I did it no, because I did it once. Not so to say that I've been doing it when I did it one time is
Yeah,
not I don't think that's fully accurate. But to
fair,
say
fair.
I got booked to play Aquaman in a cosplay pro wrestling show. So
Oh,
so
nice.
I grew my stuff out just to do that, and
Hmm.
I was like, I like it though, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna just keep rocking it. And
It suits you, man. Like it absolutely suits you.
thank you. I,
How did that gig go down? Like
oh,
were you successful?
it was oh yeah, it was a lot of fun. I mean, it was a couple of months ago, so
Hmm.
I mean, it's thrown in more since then. So
Yeah.
so I got another one coming up in like the summertime, but I'm not holding on to it only for that reason. I'm holding on to it because I don't mind looking at it.
That aesthetic, it works for you, man.
Thank you.
It absolutely works for you. Now, do you remember? Like, so I'm kind of a comics guy. Like I'm not hardcore into it, but I'm as into it as like I was way into Superman. You know what? I'm still into Superman. I can show you right now. I'll give you an inside look at the world of the doc. So behind me here on my shelf of fame, we've got the bobblehead Superman, and we've got the Dark Knight Batman, and we've got Miss Harley Quinn. But in addition to that, over here, just in front of me, I always have my superpowers collection, Superman for good luck. And if you,
And
that's right,
it
that's right. If you grew up in the '80s, you know that the superpowers collection, they all had superpowers, and Superman's was a super punch.
but it kind of looks like he's running with his arms.
He
So
does.
maybe like he's sitting in the passenger seat of the Dumb and Dumber van as they're on their way. So it feels like you're running at an incredible rate, Harry.
Anyway, what I was going to say was like it isn't it interesting that Aquaman, since the big movies like the latest kind of generation of DC movies have come out, like Aquaman is this badass with this really distinct
Yeah.
visual look, whereas
Before everyone was like, "Oh, it's just some nerd who talks to fish," and
oh man, for years he was like he was blonde haired, blue eyed, no facial hair. He was orange and green, for crying out loud.
yeah,
And it was so much of a joke. Like, you remember the TV show Entourage on,
Entourage. Yeah,
right? But that
yeah,
was kind
Entourage
of
called it.
and that was kind of the joke, was that, yeah, ha ha, he's the star of Aquaman, because they figured Aquaman was the guy who was never going to get a movie, and we can just put him in the show. But as it turned out, it was huge. It was like huge, and everyone loved it. It's fascinating to me. It's fascinating. What do you think? So what's your? I don't know if you're a superhero guy. Like what's your take on this last generation of DC movies? I mean, and they're kind of like rebooting it now, like, because we have the new Batman movie out, so they're kind of moving on from like the Affleck and kind
Dude,
of that crew. But
the new. I can't say better things about it. There's not. I can't put it over even any more than I already have. I'm talking
yeah,
about how much I really enjoyed it. I mean, it was a bit long, but it was worth
that's
it.
a bit long. That's
Yeah.
absolutely true. That's you have a talent for understatement. That's like saying WrestleMania has kind of grown to a slightly longer event. than it used to be. Yes, it was a bit long.
Yes, it was. It was a bit long,
But,
but
but,
it was.
but you were into it though. You
Yeah, yeah, it's awesome. I sat there holding my pee for like 45 minutes at the end, and I was like, "All right, I'm just gonna wait till it's over. I'm just gonna wait till it's over. It'll be over any time now. This seems like it's wrapping up, I think." And then I was like, "All right, well, uh, just a little leg cross, just a little leg cross. Everything's gonna be fine."
I'm imagining you kind of in that last whenever it was half hour or so when like so Batman and Catwoman they're riding their motorcycles
Right.
together in that highly necessary scene where they just like rode their motorcycles for about a half hour together and then they went
Uh,
different directions. Imagine
oh
you
yeah.
going, okay, come on, I get it. They're riding it. Yeah.
Because I went with my roommate and
Mhm.
he's like, "Hey man, I'm gonna go piss real quick. Let me know what happens. Let me know if I miss anything when I get back." And he came back and he hadn't missed anything.
That's
A-
right.
And I was like, I bet you I could do that. I bet you I could do that. And I was like, nah, I don't think I can. All right.
It would just be your luck that you'd miss a
A
major
very
plot point.
very important. I would be like, I come back and be like, what happened? Neo from the Matrix showed up. You missed it.
You missed it. The whole thing. There was a cameo. Marvel people showed up for some reason. I don't know, man. I don't even know.
Did
Doctor
you
Strange was in and out.
did you see the Spider-Man? The Far
I've
From Home
not,
or No Way Home?
I've not, and I that's I just haven't had the opportunity to, but I've meant to because I'm really like the Marvel movies, like this latest generation of Marvel movies have been so like there's some criticism of them that they're kind of homogenous and they all kind of feel the same and whatever. But I tell you, man, like in terms of just fun, going down easy, great performances, those Marvel movies. I mean, sure, some of them might get a little predictable, but I've really enjoyed them.
Hmm.
So cool to see a lot of the old characters from back in the day.
Oh yeah, yeah. The crossover from the Sam Raimi stuff.
Mhm.
And what's cool about it is I think Sam Raimi is maybe doing the new Doctor Strange, right?
Oh, is that the case?
I think I
Yeah, I
think
think it is the case. Yeah.
so. It's real cool to see like stuff from his franchise of the Spider-Man come back, and then him come back for Doctor Strange.
The Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies. I wasn't so hot on the third one, but the first and second ones. What they really reminded me of was, for the first time in a long time, there were superhero movies that reminded me of what it felt like to watch the old Superman movies, the old Christopher Reeve Superman movies
Okay, yeah, yeah.
when I was a kid, right? And there was even like some homage to those movies. Like there was the bit about like him, pulling open his shirt with the Spider-Man and
It,
whatever.
it it does it did give you that feel, and there was that whole like strong reds and strong blues.
Yes. And the fact that they went with in those movies with the Spider-Man costume that so closely resembled the costume from the comics, I thought was a major win because for years that was something that the movies, like when they would take these old comic characters, right, and they would put them in live action movies, one of the things I felt that really suffered was like the costume, like they had to make it all dark and you had to make it all like because I grew up with gray and blue Batman, right? Like I grew up with like the Batman of the '80s that had blue and gray and a bright yellow bat. And then when you did the live action Batman movies, like the Tim Burton and the Joel Schumacher ones, like we think of them as okay, there's a lot of colorful, kind of very comic pop art kind of stuff, but the costumes themselves got like really like almost like black, like all black.
Hmm.
And so like watching the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, like I thought that they're gonna try and make it like a kind of a dark, gritty, like they do and
Right, right.
actually. So the fact that they made it a virtual reproduction of the old the Spider-Man suit from the movie was really from the comics was really great. Really, really loved it. So, But I'm really looking forward to the new Doctor Strange, because I really enjoyed the Doctor Strange standalone movie.
Yeah.
So,
You know what? I think I really expected me to love it,
mhm.
and I just liked it.
Mm.
But taking away from that, I liked it. It's not
Yeah,
like I disliked it. I just
yeah,
didn't love it like I thought I was gonna love. Like it looked like it was. I was like, whoa, this looks so cool. But I didn't feel the hey, this is very cool as much as I felt it in the trailer.
sure. Well, a thing I will tell you, that for as much as I really enjoyed the Doctor Strange standalone movie, there was a point that I felt that it kind of, I don't know if jumped the shark is exactly what I want to say, but
There were sharks in that movie.
there were sharks, and they got jumped. They got jumped. The
They're
flying
gangsters, street sharks.
street sharks. It's a metaphor, Corey. It's a
Yes.
metaphor. No, I feel that so the first, like, maybe half to 2/3 of the movie I really dug. And then it kind of it fell into this thing that I think, again, like there's been some criticism of these Marvel movies, that they kind of fall into this kind of very predictable. It's like a villain of the week kind of thing. It's like, okay, here's yet another villain who wants to destroy and has the power to destroy all of humanity, and the hero has to figure out how to make that not happen. And it turned into, like, Dormammu, I've come to bargain with the time stone and whatnot. I could have dealt without that whole thing, because I really dug that first 2/3 where he's learning his whole shtick. He's learning to be Doctor Strange, and it's the conflict with the old disciple of Cornelius, and yada yada yada. So, but I'm looking forward to the new one, man. I've been so curious how, I mean, the whole Marvel universe kind of had this big build up to Infinity War, and like Endgame and whatnot, and now they're starting from scratch essentially. So I'm very curious. Like, I'm very curious how you kind of take that franchise that really feels like it peaked, and you build a whole new generation on it. So I'm so curious.
Yeah, it's strange to go like, well, okay, Tony Stark, one of the main characters, dead,
Yeah.
and we're just gonna figure it out now.
Yeah, we'll
we're,
figure it out.
we're just gonna try to figure it out. And Black Widow, dead.
Nah. Captain America is a new guy. It's a new guy. Well,
Yeah,
come on.
Captain America, dead.
We'll figure it
There's
out.
another one. We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out.
Did you watch those shows?
You know what? I've been trying to, I kind of pushed the pause button after Endgame, because I'm kind of like, you know what? We're gonna let it all simmer now. We're gonna let it all simmer. We're gonna get our appetite back. Because I will say that Endgame, the fact that it was a time. Now you can tell me what you think about this, but I would have been thrilled had they ended the thing with Infinity War. So Thanos has the snap.
Mm-hmm.
Half of everybody's gone.
End of
I would
movie.
have accepted that as an endpoint. Yeah, spoiler for anybody who's the end game. I would have taken that as an acceptable endpoint. I'm like, all right, let's just start over. We've got like half of our characters are gone, right? Let's just rebuild. From here. The fact that they had to do Endgame, and the fact that they made time travel this integral part of the plot really bugged me, because I hate time travel stories. I hate them. I can't. I'll run with you on Back to the Future. But beyond that, like, if we make time travel a thing, then it I feel it takes away from kind of the consequences of anything that can happen in any story, right? Because, gosh, we have time travel. We can go back, we can do it. And Endgame kind of tried to make it, there's some suspense, so they couldn't quite get it right, and et cetera, et cetera. I'm like, must we? So if we could just pretend that Endgame didn't happen, I would have loved that. And think about the challenge of rebuilding your universe again with half your. And as it turns out, they were going to do a lot of that anyway. Like you said, we've got a bunch of characters that are dead anyway. So they could have just left Endgame and had a really interesting, challenging rebuilding. I'll tell you about like the time travel conundrum, because like I always, whenever there's a really good interesting movie, either movie or movie series, that starts to kind of run in that direction, like, oh god, man, now we're going to get into this thing where it's going to introduce all these time paradoxes, and it's just, and I was scared to death that that's where Star Wars was headed, because we had the Force Awakens, which kind of introduced a whole new crop of Star Wars characters and brought us the old characters. And then we had The Last Jedi, which just threw everything into chaos, just everything into chaos. And there were things that were done in The Last Jedi that seemed like they would be really hard to undo, right? Are you okay? You're struggling. I didn't think I was voicing this controversial opinion, but Corey was having.
I was like, I'm choking on the reality that I don't really remember much of The Last Jedi. I can't. I've maybe blocked it out. I don't know.
Who would blame you? Who would blame you?
I don't know
So The Last Jedi happens, and again, they just a bunch of stuff happens that seems like it would be really hard to, like, knowing that they only had one more movie in the new, like in the sequel trilogy. Mm-hmm. After The Last Jedi, it would seem really difficult to wrap a lot of those plot points up. But knowing that J.J. Abrams was going to do the last one that they ended up calling Rise of Skywalker, and knowing that J.J. Abrams has a soft spot for time travel. Like, he's got this soft spot for it, right? Like, he worked it into the Star Trek movies. It's like, I'm like, oh no, we're doing this. And I really thought that's where he was headed. I really thought they was going to, like, well, guess what? Because they're always adding new Force powers all the time. Like, now the Force can heal people. It was never able to do that before. I fully expected, like, a time travel thing. Like, guess what? We can also travel back. And I'm like, great. Now nothing means anything. That just bring everyone back. Just unsnap. Like I just can't. Anyway, but I'm looking forward to see where Marvel goes. I'm even looking forward to seeing where Star Wars goes. I'm looking forward to the Obi-Wan TV show. So we've got some interesting things. Now, imagine if time travel was a thing in pro wrestling. Wouldn't that be an amazing thing?
Well, yeah, I would think that would be real cool. I mean,
right?
It would be a cool storyline. It was funny. Some kids that I saw, I worked the show a couple weeks ago, and I saw this kid and was wearing gear that was similar to mine, and he had long hair like me, and he was clean shaven, and I was like, "You look like a young me." This kid, and the kid said to me, he was like, "Well, if my career heads in any of the directions that yours headed in, then that's a cool sign for me." And he paid me that compliment, and I was like, nice of you to make that compliment, but here I am at the same show as you, and I'm 38 years old.
He was a little castle maniac.
Yeah,
he was a little Corey maniac. Did you tell him now if you had 3 demandments, like the Hulkster had the training, the prayers, and the vitamins? If you had 3 demandments of Corey mania that you could have imparted to your young Corey maniac, what would the 3 demandments be?
I would probably say,
don't overthink it. Don't overthink it.
I would probably say, don't overthink it. That would be the first one. I'd say,
listen here, brother, don't overthink it.
Take your expectations and just eliminate them. Just take whatever your expectations of what you're getting out of this and get rid of them, because it's not as fun when you've got expectations that you won't live up to. Expectations, I know this is like a famous thing. Expectations are resentments that have yet to come. So just if you go like, oh, well, like, when you first get into it, people were like, have a backup plan. Hey, do this. Like every part of it is get a backup plan. Have a backup plan. I never had one. I never wanted one. All I ever wanted was to be a wrestler. I thought that I was gonna be 19. I was gonna get fast tracked, just like you see happen all the time. I thought that was gonna happen to me. My expectations of, so maybe the expectations that and discover time travel. If you can time travel, figure that out. Maybe you'll have a real grasp on your expectations if you see that you've got to where you're supposed to be, and then you can come back and go, all right, I'm gonna just start working towards where I saw myself in the future.
So the 3 commandments of Corey Mania are going to be: don't overthink it, manage your expectations, and invent time travel.
There you go.
Brother, get with it, brother. That's right. It's running wild, Corey Mania. It's running wild.
So what's the world been like treating you these days? Like I'm sorry, sorry to go back. I think we maybe talked about last time about the kind of like the way the lockdown treated you and how, and now that things are kind of like easing up a bit. I don't want to say it's over, for sure. I don't want to say it's over, but it's a little easier. What's the world of Glenn Doyle now?
Well, I tell you, so much of my work revolves around like I've got kind of 2 big things that I do. Like one, of course, I'm a therapist, and I work mostly with people who have who've had trauma and complex trauma happen in their lives, and I'm enormously grateful that this technology that we're talking on right now, the video scope, as the Macho Man used to. Ooh, yeah, look into the video scope.
I'm really wondering, Glenn, if you are a bigger wrestling fan as like on the normal basis, or just because you're talking to me, the wrestling stuff's amped up a tad.
Oh no, I mean, you know what? You're probably one of the few people that I can talk to that would get them, that would actually get the references that I'm making, right? So it's a little amped up simply because it's good to be able to have someone who understands
to manage your expectations.
Man,
one of them
the 2nd commandment of Corey Mania. That's right. So I'm so grateful that I have the kind of job that I could do. I could still do a lot of therapy work with people.
See, that's a Castlemania. Sure.
Castlemania. I love it.
I actually had it designed after the WrestleMania 14 logo, that the red one. So
yeah. I love it, man. I love it.
Clear. I'm gonna try to move that up a little bit. So it looks just kind of like the Mike Tyson, Shawn Michaels, Steve Austin.
Oh, I love it.
Angle.
I love it.
That year's WrestleMania. I asked the guy to kind of rip that off a little bit. Don't tell WWE. Don't send this to them.
Oh, they're notoriously laid back about enforcement of their copyrights.
So yeah.
It's gonna be fine, Corey. just ask anybody who tries to upload something to YouTube. They're just laid back.
Yeah, dude. My little podcast's small potatoes to WWE. They're not paying attention to anything I'm doing. So that's fine. That's fine.
Brother. We'll talk, when I'm back on your show on episode 666, we'll talk about how your media empire has exploded.
Right now, small potatoes. Back by 666, gigantic potatoes.
Big potatoes. Big potatoes.
Big potatoes.
That might be our episode title. Big potatoes.
Big potatoes.
Big potatoes, brother. So anyway, no, I'm really lucky to have the type of job that I can do a lot of the work like this, and as we've kind of gotten in and out of this pandemic, and then like I'm not prepared to say that it's over, because I mean, we all thought this was over months ago when we had a minute where everyone got vaccinated, and we thought that was going to be it.
Well, do you think perhaps that this is like alternate timeline? Yeah. Maybe it did get fixed, or maybe it didn't happen, and somehow we joined in some alternate timeline where it's here and not going anywhere.
If that's the case, I would like to meet up with whoever stole the sports almanac and slipped it to Biff, because boy, this has just been a major pain in the ass.
Biff is not being a real BFF right now.
He's not being a BFF. He's being a butthead. So I'm lucky enough that I still get to do a lot of the work that I was doing. The other big thing that's and my patients are all rock stars, and that hasn't changed. My patients really came through this pandemic and still did a lot of super important work. And if any of them are watching my face or listening to my words right now, you are my rock stars and you are my inspirations, and I love you guys. You're amazing. The other big thing that I do is
now at this point, you call them out individually, then say what their major issues are.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's no violations in that, right?
In fact, I think I just violated HIPAA by acknowledging that they exist and they're awesome.
Just by they acknowledging the existence of a doctor's patients is a violation.
You know what? I tweeted something like that not long ago. I'm like, hey guys, I'm about ready to violate HIPAA and tell you something important about my patient. You ready? You ready? They're awesome. I have expected that, there's a subset of people who take HIPAA. I mean, you should take HIPAA very seriously, but I have expected somebody to be like, oh, don't joke about that. It's true though. Awesome.
You can't make jokes about HIPAA not okay, let me try to reword this. I'll start from the beginning.
It's gonna be amazing. Go for it. Yes. I can't wait. Do I need to
yeah. You can't share personal information about patients because that might make you a hypocrite.
Oh, a hypocrite. Oh, that's why you're a professional. That's why you're a professional. I mean, if you were telling jokes at the Oscars and someone tried to lay one into you, I mean, you wouldn't have, because you're a professional.
Well, I actually was on stage a couple days ago, and I was like, I don't bring up that I'm a wrestler ever. That's not the thing I bring up on stage. But the guy who introduced me said that when bringing me up, so I just had to acknowledge it. And I was like, all right, I know that this has probably been talked about by every open micer and every comedy thing that you've been to in the last couple of weeks, and I haven't had a chance to say anything about it yet. But like, excuse me, in our business, if one of the fans comes near us and swings at us, we're allowed to kill them. So come on and swing at me. Try it, please. If I'm gonna offend you with a joke, come at me, bro.
I was just impressed. I didn't see it in real time. I saw clips of it afterward, but I was impressed. And there's a lot to be said about it. I don't want to get too serious about it, but the thing that struck me is like if somebody struck me in any way, because at first it looked like a punch, and of course, having been a wrestling fan growing up, I can't like as an adult, if I was ever involved in a fight, I would not. I mean, I'd be working the punch. I'd be like stomping the ground and why aren't you going down? I remember being on the playground. I remember like being a kid, like you're getting scuffles at the end, then you're stomping the ground and like go down. But he didn't go down. Like and I was curious about that. And then everyone was like, well, he didn't punch him, he slapped him. I'm like, I would still go down. Like there's no universe in which somebody would have struck me and I wasn't expecting it. And I would not have at the very least gone, I might have gotten back up.
Gonna sell it a good amount so that you'll get some money in the settlement.
Yeah, no doubt. Gotta sell it like Vince selling a stunner. We'll talk about that in a minute, but
yeah.
No, so coming back to so continuing to work with patients, and that they're my pride and my joy, and I don't care who knows it. The other big thing that I do is I'm board president of a nonprofit organization called Seek Safely. And I think we talked about this a little bit last time, where we are strong believers in ethics and accountability in the self-help industry. So we work really hard to kind of educate people about what makes for kind of ethical self-help. And I know both you and I are into self-help and wellness and life hacks and these kinds of things. And the thing with the pandemic was that it really changed the landscape of the self-help industry, because suddenly a bunch of self-help gurus who had primarily made their bank on like kind of these live events, like we think about self-help gurus like Tony Robbins, who had these like stadium events where people come and get really excited. Can't do that during the pandemic. But a bunch of them, including your best friend, James Arthur Ray, started doing their events online. And discovered.
I was going to ask you. If you had opinions on Aubrey Marcus and on it, that whole fit for service, that whole idea. Tell me if you've heard of it, or what your opinions are, if you've researched it in any way.
I've not researched it. It's familiar to me. I don't know enough about it to really give a but I'm curious.
Okay. I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts on it are. I mean, I'm a big fan. I love Aubrey Marcus. I think his podcast is great. I think everybody he's ever had on his podcast are great. But I started Googling it because he does these seminars like the Fit for Service and stuff. And I started Googling it, and people were like, "It's a cult. He feeds you with all these psychedelic drugs, and then he upsells you on some shit." And I was like, "Oh, I didn't think that was the case at all." But
he gets. I do. The thing that I do know about him is that he has a reputation for kind of being a. I mean, it's kind of the same niche as Joe Rogan, that he amplifies a lot of voices that some people have an issue with, and my take on that has always been, I feel the same way about Joe Rogan. Like, my take on that is that man, there are always going to be teachers. I feel the same way about James Arthur Ray, for what it's worth. Like, there are always going to be teachers out there who are going to say things and make claims that like, are they going to hold up to 100% empirical scientific scrutiny, whatever that means in our world? I don't know. I think there are a lot of these teachers that say things that are worth thinking about. And so I really value platforms like his and like Joe Rogan's. Like, I really value platforms that do amplify these voices. Although I'm also sympathetic to the point of view, like, there's some of these guys that don't need to be amplified. There's some of these guys that really, if they just, but here's my, I tell you what, though, speaking of cults, my take on that is also that, boy, you can make that argument that, okay, some of these voices don't need to be amplified. But it also seems to me that, look, if there is a problem with their message, right, and if there's a conversation to be had around what might be problematic messaging, wouldn't you want more people to be exposed to it so more people can point out what the problems are? Like, if they stayed in kind of their own universe, right, in their own bubble, I think that would make it more likely for little cults of personality. The cult of personality. Little cults of personality to take root, right? Right. So, I think it's a really mixed bag. But going back to what I was saying was that, boy, during the lockdown and the pandemic, Instagram and YouTube and TikTok became real go-to destinations for people to get kind of self-help resources and tips and hacks, and to become familiar with these self-help personalities. And so Seek Safely, this nonprofit that I'm board president of, like, we got really, really interested in how influencers, wellness and self-help influencers really use these platforms to develop their followings, which is probably not something that would have happened had everybody not been forced to spend essentially a year and a half at home staring at screens.
During that year and a half, I was head of the board too.
Yeah.
BORED.
Hey. Oh, that's an old Norm Macdonald chestnut right there, man. That's old Norm Macdonald. When I think it was when
Saget roast.
It wasn't the Saget roast. It was when an actress whose name is escaping me, the chick from one of the women from Melrose Place.
Right. Right. I know exactly what you're talking about. The chairman of the board. Yeah, he was on Letterman with
On
the
Conan, yeah.
Conan. Okay, yeah, I know exactly. I know the clip because sometimes I'll just put on YouTube like an hour of Norm stuff, and I just
Yes. Oh my
sit there
God.
and consume it because been it's been underrated for so long. And
I was such a huge Norm Macdonald fan. I'm actually really curious to kind of get your thoughts on. I mean, of course, we lost Norm here a few months ago, but I mean, I was such a huge fan even before he passed. 'Cause I would do the same thing. Like I would put on just let him play,
right.
and his book that I when it first came out a few years ago. That's which was advertised as he's like, well,
The memoirs.
yeah, he's like, well, it's a memoir. And he had this whole spiel that he did about it, right? He's like, it's a memoir. It's like, it's not true, but it contains truth. Like Norm, you're deep. But so as a comedian, like, so you were into Norm, like how did that hit you, man? That's a big loss for the world of comedy, right?
I don't know how to say it. When famous people die, I don't get too personally wrapped up in it, really. I mean, it is somebody for sure, somebody who's beloved to me. Like that for sure. Norm is huge, but somehow some of them I've taken too hard, and some of them I want to not take them so hard. So I'll like kind of try to forget about it a little bit. Like
Yeah.
like Chester and Cornell, like those deaths, I took them way too hard, and I still have the effects of that stuff. But when it, I don't, I guess I didn't feel as much like I should. I'm also very. I know he wasn't good, and that's not a story that came out until after he was gone. But that made me grateful that he's gone from his suffering.
Right.
That, so the fact that we still have those hours of YouTube content of Norm, we still have dirty work to talk about forever.
Dirty work.
It's
That's
not,
a gem. That's a
yeah.
gem. Something they should remake in the Marvel canon.
Oh yeah. Dude,
Imagine that on Disney Plus.
when, in the world of the blind, the man with one eye is king. In the world of skunks, the man with no nose rules. Go!
Some of my favorites. So a couple things. Like, so when he passed, and it became known that he'd been suffering with cancer for, I mean, almost a decade. I think it was that, and he kept it to himself. But you could look back upon his material because he would frequently talk about things like suffering and death,
And he always talked about being afraid of death. Yeah, he talked about that a lot.
big time. And he had this brilliant this entire bit that he did about like so cancer. I can't do a Norm Macdonald impression, but it's like, so cancer, right? They always say that somebody lost their battle with cancer. It's like, I don't know. If you die and the cancer's in you, the cancer also dies. So that's like a draw, right? Like, that's not so bad. Not like cancer's like, he's dead now. I'm gonna go sleep with his wife.
In wrestling, we would call that a Broadway. When a 10-year Broadway with cancer.
He went 10-year Broadway. It was Wyndham and Flair for an hour. No, it wasn't. It was Norman cancer. But you could see how he had woven what was obviously happening in his mind and in his life into that material that he was producing, and you can only see it in retrospect. It's heartbreaking. But I really love something that I really value about his comedy is that he had this like, he was a great storyteller, and a lot of his jokes, I mean, sure, he had blue material and whatnot, but a lot of his jokes were just like you mentioned, the Saget roast, which is famous for he was telling these old school dumb dad jokes, like dumb And he
Gilbert, when you
and
see yourself going to the restroom, you'll see a sign on the door that says, "Gentlemen, pay no heed." Go.
pay no heed, go on in. It's great to be here among your well wishers, Bob, and many of them would like to throw you down a well. Get it? They wanna murder you in a well. Huh? Huh?
Yeah, dude, you do a way better Norm impression than you think you do.
But the thing about Norm was he would tell these, like he would have like a half-hour version of what's are really kind of short jokes. Like so there's one of my favorite, I think one of everybody's favorite Norm Macdonald jokes is his moth joke, right? And the moth joke, the essential structure of the moth, it's a very simple joke. It's like, okay, so a guy goes into a podiatrist, foot doctor, and he says, the doc says, "What's wrong?" He says, "Doc, I think I'm a moth." He says, "What do you mean you think you're a moth?" He says, "I believe I am a moth." And he says, "Dude, if you think that's a moth, you've got problems like up here, and you should go to a psychiatrist, not a podiatrist. What are you doing here? And like, why did you come here?" The guy says, "Because the light was on." Right? That's the
Yeah,
joke. That's the entire joke.
but
Norm had a version of that joke that if you look it up on YouTube, just like Norm Macdonald moth joke. Without exaggeration, like he milks it for like 15 minutes. He has this whole narrative about how the moth goes, the guy goes into the podiatrist and he's all depressed and he's got this, like, he turns it into like a Russian novel leading up to that dumb punchline of because the light was on. Yeah, right. The light was, it's a moth. Get it? Rest in peace, Norm. But we also lost. Speaking of folks we've lost, so now I'm curious as to, like, so you said there's some celebrity deaths that you took hard, some celebrity deaths that you actually actively tried not to take.
the thing is, because I don't really also I'm really weird with the word celebrity, so I get it's, there is levels of like people who are performers who I very much respect,
Sure.
and uh it's I just have weirdness about like praising folks
Sure.
because people are people,
Sure.
and as we've seen, very
That's
flawed.
That's from the Muppets Take Manhattan. Peoples is peoples. Go on, yeah. No, people are people. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what was the question you were asking me?
No, I was going to. I mean, I was actually going to ask you if So who did kind of hit you when they passed, and I mean, you mentioned a couple.
Yeah, Chris Cornell was the hardest one, I think.
I know a few people who really took that, like, were really, really affected by that. Yeah.
I think Chris Cornell and then Chester being right after that, like 6 months after to the day,
Yeah.
that just the back to back of those two
Yeah.
hit me really hard, and that's still some of my most played music is from those guys.
You bet. You bet.
But
What do you think makes the difference in somebody's passing who you take really, really hard, really personally, versus somebody who you keep a little bit of distance on?
well, I think sometimes it's like I feel the insincerity of social media is sometimes it's hard to, like, when someone famous died, like Scott Hall, the Scott Hall,
Yeah.
that's huge, and that did affect a lot of people. And I don't
Right.
think anybody who posted about Scott Hall's death was being insincere, because
Right.
when other people die, people go, "Oh, look, I took a picture of him at a convention. I took a picture with him at a convention 10 years ago." Like,
Mhm.
yeah, but like this guy was probably a piece of shit. Like, what was, like, there's probably stuff about this person that was not favorable, and nothing else was really I don't want to say respectable, but nothing was really like uh, what else did they do? Like, who were they?
Right.
That's the question I always, and like that's also the same thing going back to Scott Hall. It's like Scott Hall was somebody who tortured his family for a long time with his and it's like the way that he passed was not at all the path that everyone thought was the way it was going to go at
Very
all.
much, very much. Oof.
But
It's it's so interesting because Scott Hall specifically, I think, really represented something to a generation, and represented different things too, right? Like, so kind of that I mean, not I mean, putting aside the great work he did in the WWF as Razor Ramon, which is the hey yo, what a great character, like what a great example of, like, Vince McMahon, for all the criticism he gets in so many ways, for all the criticism he gets for turning especially wrestlers of that era into kind of cartoon characters. Sometimes it just clicks, and with that character, it really clicks.
KLIQs.
Right, click, get it, get it,
Get it? The light was on.
The light was on. They want to murder you in a well, Bob. Click, get it. Not the Bone Street Crew. The Click. That's a deep cut.
Did you watch the Hall of Fame speech?
I did.
Well, then it's not that deep of a cut. It's right fresh on the surface of everyone's memories.
That's true.
Everyone.
For a long time, it was a deep cut. For a long time.
Yeah. BSK, bro.
BSK, bro. Which I'm sorry, it sounds lame. I can't.
Oh yeah, I think the main idea of it was just to confront, like, to be a different Click.
To have a counterweight, right? To have a counterweight
to the Click, yeah. And I think it had to do with they played dominoes.
Dominoes, yeah, that was it.
I
mean, don't get me wrong. I'm never going to say Taker that it was lame, but I'm just,
hey, excuse me, that was dumb,
Mr. Calloway. You in your smoking jacket. Anyway, no. So Scott Hall.
Well. You say that you'll never tell that to the Undertaker, but the Undertaker said to never say never. So
that's true.
So well, maybe don't say that.
That's maybe not. Hey, maybe
one day you'll catch him and you'll be like, hey, just gotta tell you this real quick, because I told you, I said I'd never say it, but I have to say it because you told me to never say never. But the Bone Street Crew was stupid.
Yes, K is lame. It's lame, sir. It's funny too about. I mean, not to get too far off what we were talking about, but like so, I remember when Undertaker debuted, okay, legend. Like, he became a legend, but once upon a time, he was another example actually of like a very, at the time, very cartoonish. And when he beat Hulk Hogan for his first WWF title, I remember the wrestling magazines. I remember Pro Wrestling Illustrated would not cut him a break. It's like that. This man as a champion is a joke. He's a Vince McMahon cartoon, and like, we're supposed to take this guy seriously. Come on, he's clearly not a zombie. Because PWI was like that. People was like, WWF is this circus, and they've got animals and snakes and whatever. Like, come on, it's a zombie. Because they all thought that, PWI was staffed by, they all wanted Harley Race to be champion forever. But anyway, so it's fascinating now to kind of fast forward to, he's now in the Hall of Fame and retired and whatnot. He became this legendary figure. But I remember when it was like, oh, come on, he's dead. Sure, he's dead. Whatever. Anyway,
it was kind of neat to see him with the Britney Spears headset on and doing the whole TED talk. I thought that was neat. But him not giving a thank you to Mick Foley was kind of poop, though.
That's true. That's absolutely true. We're coming back to Scott Hall. I think that in that generation, right? Like, so again, like, you take, like, for all the great work he did in the WWF as Razor Ramon, like so many people are going to remember him, for the NWO angle that really changed things. And the fact that he kind of kicked it off, like when we think of like when did the NWO angle really start, it was him coming through the crowd.
Dude, I think about that all the time. There's never a moment where I'm not thinking about him in the denim, in the full denim, going, you know who I am,
but you don't know
but
why.
you don't know what.
Right?
Because that so lent to the fact that it seemed like WWF was crossing over to WCW, and it like lent to making the NWO cool because they weren't WCW guys.
Big time. And the fact that a few years prior to that, we almost got that story in a different form. Like we'd had Ric Flair jump to the WWF with the real
yeah,
right. And Vince uncharacteristically had whiffed. Like they like for one brief shining moment, we thought we were going to get our WrestleMania 7 main event of Hulk Hogan versus Ric Flair, and it didn't happen. And WrestleMania 7 was great. Like we got Savage and Flair on the one hand, and Hogan and Sid, which was a modern day masterpiece. Don't try and tell me I'm wrong. With a mistimed Papa Shango run-in. Anyway, but the point being, like we had almost got it a few years prior, and
that was also, I have to say real quick before I burst your bubble. Yeah. That was a little bit before my time. I was not watching wrestling yet at that point.
You missed. You missed. So it was a great big deal. Like I can tell you that, and I was pretty young at the time, that much older, but it was a pretty big deal to see Ric Flair show up because, Vince was famous. The WWF was famous for having when they would bring in guys that you recognize from the other promotions, they bring him in, but they give him a new name and new music and the whole thing, right? Like so, Kerry Von Erich shows up,
the Texas Tornado,
Texas Tornado, right? Like Kurt Hennig shows up and he's Mr. Perfect, and mind you, these are former world champions. Like Kurt Hennig was an AWA world champion. Like Kerry Von Erich was an NWA and world class world champion.
Did you ever? There's the Mr. Perfect DVD. There's a match he had for the AWA Heavyweight Championship with Nick Bockwinkel, and I rewound this 100 times because it cracks me up. When Kurt hits him, throws him off the ropes, and hits him with the axe, right in the head, and then Nick Bockwinkel goes down and he's gigging. He's gigging. There's a guy in the front row in the crowd, not in the front row, but maybe a couple rows back. And he's like, he's cutting himself. He's got like there was a guy like making this hand motion, and I didn't notice that until like way after. But I wonder if that destroyed kayfabe for anybody. Well, for sure that guy.
For that guy, yeah, definitely for that guy. But I mean, it was standard practice for like it was not unusual to see guys that you knew from the other shows show up on WWE, but it was usually new name, new whatever. To see Ric Flair show up as Ric Flair and with the big gold belt was extraordinary. And for one brief shining moment, we thought we were going to get our inter-federation feud, and then it didn't happen.
But then the ball also got dropped during the invasion and all that stuff too. So that whole thing could have been so cool.
Absolutely.
But it was just a dud.
It was a dud. So that early NWO angle, right? Like with coming through the crowd and never really acknowledging, like, yeah, we're from up north, and my buddy from up north is going to come down, and who's going to be the third man. Finally kind of gave us that it scratched that itch that we've been looking to get scratched for a long, long time. And so I think that's one of the reasons why obviously Scott Hall stands out in everybody's mind. But even if you fast forward a couple of years, so one of the hallmarks of WCW storytelling at the time that Eric Bischoff in his book Controversy Creates Cash which is a good read. I highly recommend it. But Bischoff talks about it. He's like, look, I wanted to at that time, I wanted to create a storytelling style that is the exact opposite of all that cartoony WWF nonsense. So we're going to keep it very real and kind of dark, and it's kind of like the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight, right? Like there's going to be no Adam West bat ears, right? Like we're going to keep it dark and real and gritty. And as part of that, I mean, again, as an audience, we really hadn't seen that. Like we'd grown up on Vince's, his Max Moon and fucking, like we hadn't really seen that. But suddenly we're getting Scott Hall, and they're making an angle out of his real life addiction to alcohol. And not only was that an extraordinary departure from what we'd seen, it was also the first time that I can remember that what we saw on TV was mirroring what a lot of the audience members had experience with, like in their life, because like, look, if you don't have a problem with alcohol, someone who does, or you have a family member who does, right? So the fact that this was being woven into storylines, whatever you think of that, was extraordinary. So, I mean, Scott Hall was kind of there for kind of these pivotal moments that I think really made an impression on a lot of people. So when, now that he has passed on, I think a lot of people are having a reaction because they're remembering, they're thinking like, man, that stuff that had such a profound impact on me was decades ago now. Like it speaks to the passage of time. In this really profound way that I think
somebody should invent time travel now.
It's one of the 3 commandments of Castlemania. So
it's about time. It's about
brother.
But
what did you think of the resurrection of Jake the Snake? That whole movie.
I think it was important. I think it was. If you were ever a fan of these men, you should be watching this film. Yeah. Did you watch the Netflix show that DDP was on? It was like a Guardians of the something.
No, I didn't.
Oh, he plays like a Batman character. It's like they're totally ripped off like the Justice League, all DC characters, but they're all like flawed. It's kind of like The Boys. Did you ever see The Boys?
I heard about it. No, I didn't actually watch it, but no, my buddy loved it. No, yeah.
But this show, Guardians of the, it's not Guardians of the Galaxy, but it's Guardians of the Globe, I think it's called. But It's a DDP. I don't even know who else is in it at all. But it's like a cool, like sort of like real gritty show.
Nice. DDP, talk about a guy with just buckets of charisma and consummate performer. I would love to meet DDP one of these days. Like if I ever blow up and get to be like Tony Robbins big, that's one of the guys I want to meet is Norman Dallas Page.
Well, he's a dream podcast guest of mine.
I can imagine.
He's for sure somebody, because I really like to have conversations with people who there's maybe some sort of personal connections. And one of my friend Aaron Gainey, who he died a couple of years ago, but he was going through some real hard times with diabetes, and he was really obese, and he was talking to DDP on the phone, like, and they were trying to get something set up, and I just wanted to, I think Aaron actually gave me DDP's number, and the funny thing about it was, like, I didn't ever, I don't think I really had my podcast for a very long time while Aaron was still alive, because I know that we had scheduled it for that June, and he had to reschedule with me, and that was back when I was recording at a studio, so we had to drive to the studio, and I'd have to like take him to the elevator and stuff because he couldn't do steps, and his something happened with his kid or something, so we had to postpone, and then we postponed too many times, and I missed the opportunity. But I love to have the opportunity to have conversations with people who've meant so much to me and have taught me all these lessons and have really had and I think in the beginning, before I ever even started the podcast, I wanted to be able to have conversations with people that I believed had an evolved mindset.
Sure.
And an evolved mindset is what makes me want to continue to talk to you.
You bet. You bet.
Yeah.
So then I just drag us back to pro wrestling from the 80s and 90s, and the evolution. Is the evolution. And I think, again, another reason, the reason why I bring, the resurrection of Jake the Snake and DDP up is because I think that when we're thinking about how certain people's passing affects us and how, there's kind of such an outpouring around Scott Hall. Again, not only is he very memorable because of these moments that he was involved in the business, but I think a subset of folks, followed his journey, partially through that movie and kind of subsequently. Yeah. But I think it really spoke to, just like Jake Roberts. Just that journey really speaks to, like a lot of people who are in recovery, not just from addiction, but recovery from whatever. Like, so if you read my social media stuff, like, that I'm forever talking about recovery. And sometimes people will say, well, so what exactly is recovery? Because, I don't just use it in that narrow sense of like staying sober. Right. I am a recovering addict, but I think of recovery broadly as recovery from depression, recovery from trauma, recovery from eating disorder, things that
I think recovery is also like from habits.
Absolutely.
Like not just bad habits, it's just patterns you're in that you can see yourself being better by not being inside of those patterns.
You bet. So recovery from pain, from self-sabotage, from
I'm trying to recover from I do this thing where I'll wash a bunch of clothes,
mm-hmm.
and I'll dry them and I'll put them in my room and they'll sit there, and then I'll just wash them again. Like I'll not fold them and I'll not do it. And then like I know I have to do it, but I just don't. And then it all gets like just dirty again. And that's a cycle I'm trying to break.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, I get asked a lot, like, look, what's the point of all of this?
And see, the laundry was the cycle, you see.
There's the cycle.
The light was on.
I think that might be the episode title. What are you doing here?
I don't remember what the first thing you said was now.
I'm trying to potatoes.
Oh, big potatoes.
Small potatoes, big potatoes. And the light was on. Bob, they say your face is like a flower. Yeah, a cauliflower. Get it? Your face is like a cauliflower. No, but that's the thing that I get asked a lot. Look, what's the point of any of this? Like, so psychologists, like, we're kind of in this role, like, especially since I do a lot of kind of wellness and self-help stuff as well as just therapy.
Mm-hmm.
We get asked a lot, like, what's the point of all this? The meaning of life. Like, I can't tell you what the meaning of life is because I think we kind of create it all. Like, meaning of my life is going to be different from your life, that kind of thing. I said, but I can tell you that I don't think we're here to suffer. Like, I think we're here to create a quality of life that we find worth waking up for. And what you're talking about in terms of breaking out of cycles, laundry and otherwise, is really like when we're trapped in a cycle. That's just it's both metaphorically and literally what keeps us from creating that quality of life. And I think it's really important to be able to take a step back and say, okay, look, it's not just the case that life sucks. Like, you get some people who kind of philosophically say, like, well, life sucks. right? And like the Stoics would say that. Like the Stoics would say, life is difficult and we got to figure out a way to handle that. And just, but I think that we can actually take a step back and say, well, sure, like there's a certain amount of stuff in life that's probably going to hurt. Like it hurts when we lose things. Like it hurts when people pass away. And like we were just talking about, it hurts when time passes and our bodies deteriorate, whatever. That said, is that where most of our hurt comes from? I'm not convinced that's the case. Like I'm convinced that a lot of our hurt comes from kind of this old programming. It's one of the reasons why I'm primarily a trauma therapist, is that I think that, man, we have so many experiences that program us with these ideas and these beliefs about who we are and what's possible, that a lot of our work is in kind of sifting through what we were handed growing up. And by the way, which feels right. Like when we have a belief that's been kind of programmed into us and conditioned over years, it feels right because we've never known otherwise.
Right. Every itch gets scratched one way or the other.
Yeah.
What I want to know, how did you break? Like what lessons or what methods did you apply to break your habits that have made you realize maybe what it is you're meant to do?
Sure.
And did finding that assist you in the shedding of that old programming that was hurtful to you?
You bet. So the biggest moments in my life in terms of shifts that have happened, I've come to kind of think about them in terms of I've paid attention to what turns me on, gives me pleasure, gives me joy, which was when I was growing up was not a priority, right? Like we grow up and we're taught, like especially in this culture, like we're taught that, like what we're supposed to do is work hard and we're supposed to endure hardship and endure pain. And that's what builds character, right? And we're almost taught that, we are taught that our enjoyment or our joy is almost kind of it's not important. Like it's lovely if it happens, but you're not here to experience joy. Like you're here to work hard and develop character, right?
Yeah, I think that joy stands in the way of productivity.
Right.
Stands in the way of being a cog in the machine, like being somebody who's productive enough to make enough money to afford them a home and food.
Exactly. And check it out. Like I think the people who do the programming often are reasonably well intentioned. Like I don't think my parents got up every morning and said, okay, how can I make his life difficult? I think they thought they were instilling character. It's my observation, though, that well, I'll put it this way. So I grew up and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life. Like for a long time when I was a kid, I wanted to be a politician, right? Oh, by the way, 2020 was supposed to be the year that I was going to get elected president. You don't even know. Like in 5th grade, I was making little campaign posters. Doyle, 2020, yeah. Like if you talk to anybody who knows me from grade school, like in 2020, they were messaging me. They're like, this is it, right? Because they remembered from back then.
And then you were like, you see what the world is now? I don't know.
I don't want anything to do with this, man. I dodged a bullet in a big way. No, but that's the thing. When I got to thinking, and actually in high school, I did volunteer for like some campaigns and I got kind of involved in politics. And what I noticed was that the stuff that politics asks of you, it just made me miserable, right? I didn't like doing like it's like I'm kind of an introvert and like it required a lot of networking and a lot of that just first of all it made me super anxious. I just didn't like, and it also required you to do a lot of kind of schmoozing and and saying things that were not necessarily untrue, but things that were you kind of had to massage the truth a little bit.
So it was a bit of moral compromise, a bit.
It's a moral compromise. It was just, my point is that it was stuff that did not feel good. It did not spark joy.
Mm. So it was a campaign.
It was a campaign, if you will. It was a campaign. Man, he is Corey the pun master. If you ever need a new gimmick, he is the pun master.
I was
kind
once
of like a shock master and get you like a stormtrooper hat. And he's the pun master. Campaign bursting through the wall.
He will shock you. He will pun you because
he will punish you.
He's a there you go.
Anyway, but my point is that so after that, I kind of bounced around, and I had the idea for a minute. I kind of wanted to be a rock star and be a musician or whatever. But then I thought about that, and I thought about like, okay, so the types of things that you need to do to be a working performer. First of all, you needed to be a lot better at music than I ever was, but but you also need to do things like you need to work certain gigs and probably always work another job and like they're not things that when I thought about them kind of filled me with kind of joy. Now again, listen to how I'm talking about this, and we all know somebody who would listen to what I'm saying and say, like, who cares if it would give you joy? Like, you need a job, sir. Where I really turned a corner was, I had dropped out of school. I had this major depressive episode, and I was acting out, and I was miserable. And of course I was, because I was thinking about my life in terms of what I have to do. Right, like these character building experiences to be
obligations for necessity.
Right. Absolutely. But where I really turned a corner was getting interested in, actually, like my first getting interested in psychology was I got really interested. I was always interested in self-help. So as a teenager, I was reading, because I was desperately depressed. And so I was reading like Tony Robbins books, and I got into like Wayne Dyer books, and then much later on, I got into James Arthur Ray books. But the point is that I got interested in hypnosis. I thought this was a fascinating thing, and it sparked joy. Like the entire, like as you got into reading, and I'm not just talking about like the stage hypnosis where like I'm going to make you bark like a dog and click like a chicken and think that this water bottle is your brain that you've pulled out of your head. Like you do a post-prom, they hire the stage hypnotist at post-prom.
They do that at prom?
I remember that in high school, one of our post-prom things that they had like a stage hypnotist and have you do these wacky things that are not hypnosis. But I got really interested in actual hypnosis, and I started going down this wonderful rabbit hole of reading things from like Milton Erickson and Bill O'Hanlon about things that the mind can do when you enter into a trance state, like how Richard Bandler, one of the kind of pioneers of American hypnosis, called a transformation. Transformation. You can transform. So I got fascinated with this, and it sparked joy. I'm like, I could see myself being at the time I thought, like, I don't know, like is there a degree, is there a license for hypnotism? It turns out there's not. Turns out the closest thing you can do is get trained and licensed as a mental health practitioner who also does hypnosis as part of your work. But as I got even interested in that, I got exposed to more and more behavior change technologies, which just thrilled me. And this was all stuff that got me really interested, that made me want to read the books, that made me want to go to the classes, that made me want to, progress in this career field. I think when you're paying attention to things that turn you on, when you're paying attention to things that spark joy, when you're paying attention to things that make you want to do the thing, as opposed to, I've got to do the thing because I got to pay the bills. And, I've got to do the thing because I'm supposed to do the thing, right? That's really where again, in my life, where a shift can happen, because suddenly you're not as interested in escaping reality, right? Because you've started to create a reality for yourself that includes things that you can see yourself doing every day and actually getting value from for yourself, not just for somebody else, or not just for, because you're supposed to, or because you need a paycheck or whatnot. So my biggest piece of, I guess, advice, and I don't really give advice, but my biggest recommendation is, when somebody's looking to make a major shift, really get interested in the things that turn you on. Really get interested in the things that pull you, right? That speak to you. Like, a way to apply this, for example, with breaking cycles, as we were just talking about. As long as the laundry stays on your bed, and you've got this idea, like, well, I should fold the laundry because I should fold the laundry. Come on, it's what grown-ups do. They fold the laundry. Come on, my mom is telling me that I should fold the laundry. Come on, I can't have a girl over if the laundry's over. Like all this stuff that speaks to, like, the supposed to thing. Your brain is still going to go, there's nothing here. Like, there's nothing here that I'm into. There's a big difference between that, as opposed to, like, okay, is there any aspect of, in this case, folding the laundry and putting it away, that could get connected to something that I'm actually interested in, that I actually want, that could be, like, would it actually turn me on to, and when I say turn me on, I mean just kind of in the broad sense of, like, would it give me pleasure to have a living space that's not cluttered up with all this laundry, right?
Right.
Would it actually give me pleasure to feel as if I conquered a thing? Would it actually give me pleasure? And by the way, what's the smallest step I could take? Like, okay, like doing, folding the laundry might be overwhelming, but is the tiniest baby step that I can take toward getting laundry folded, like is that overwhelming? So it's these types of things that, once you tune into something that you actually want, as opposed to something you're supposed to do or something you have to do. Like, I tell this to my addicts all the time, that, look, as long as your motivation for getting sober is, look, somebody's on my ass about it, you will continue to be an addict. Like, you really will. Like it doesn't even matter who it is. Like, oh God, the only reason I'm doing. We saw this in the resurrection of Jake the Snake, right? Mm-hmm. Like as long as the only thing that was kind of pushing him toward change was, his people were in his life telling him he should clean up. What really made the difference for him was when there was something on the horizon that he actually wanted, right? Like, he wanted to perform at first it was the Royal Rumble, but then it turned into, like, that Raw,
mm-hmm.
Like, that's actually when we tune into things that we actually like, and that make our brain light up, and then give us kind of little tingles. Like, that's where it makes a difference in breaking cycles and stuff. So that's a long answer to a short question. But that's me.
I think it's ultra personal for me, in that, really, like, I wasn't bringing that up just to do that dumb joke, but I mean, it was fun to do. But I mean, I'm someone who has been needing some structure in life. Yeah. And having a basket of laundry in my room unfolded is not structure.
Yeah.
And I want that. The reason, let me just tell you, Glenn, the reason I asked you to do the show is because I need some help.
That's right.
I need you to treat me like I'm one of your patients, and sort of ask me all the questions that you'd ask somebody like me, who needs help.
Are we still talking about the laundry, or we're talking about a broader thing, man?
I think it's all encompassing. It's all encompassing.
So, what do you need help with? What do you got? Like, what?
Yeah. I'll just take it. I'll take whatever. No, because I'm really not. I'm also. I mean, I have my tough guy, too proud moments. Like, and I have my, like, I don't ask for help, and I don't let people in
Yeah.
really that much, and I have that same thing almost like where I said like I'm weird with the word celebrity, I'm weird with the word favor, I'm
Yeah.
weird with the word like you're welcome. I
Mm.
don't know why I have these weirdnesses with these phrases and praises. Like
Mhm.
it's just I am uncomfortable about religion. I'm uncomfortable about it's so weird. And I want to try to be sensitive about this. Uh,
I can't wait for this. This is going to be good. Yeah, hit us, Corey.
okay, so um, my girlfriend's a Buddhist, right?
Mhm.
Um, like she's like she has like the Gohanzen and like she chants at that, and that's like, super important to her.
Yeah.
And and she talked to me about like meditating with her or something, and I mean I had done it a bunch of times, but I just had to. I finally got to the point where I was like, I'm sorry, it doesn't do anything for me, and I don't want to be a jerk, and I don't want to ruin your thing. This thing works for you, but I know that the that like screaming at this dartboard, like it's not. It's like you're also then saying like people's names. Like these are humans who are flawed, like who maybe accepted being some false prophet, and maybe I don't want to idolize people. Like I not only idolize people because they're flawed, but the people who were entrusted to carry on what these people wanted to carry on are also flawed.
Sure.
And I went. I didn't think I'd talk about this, but I went to. It was a couple years after Aaron died, maybe a year or two after Aaron died. Um, One of his friends asked me if I would go with him to a Buddhist gathering, and they were holding the beads and they were chanting into the Gohanzen, and it got real quiet, and then they started chanting again, and then his friend turned to me and like serious as possible, and he was like whoever's house it was, he was like whatever her name was, he was like, I'd really like to F her. And I was like, what are you doing? Like this is you just peopled this up. Like this was a thing that like could have helped people. That's like you peopled it too much, and
People
you
do
like
that.
you just ruined any idea I can have about turning this into a thing more sacred than what I'm already doing. I've
Mm.
already got a thing that works for me, but no, actually, at that point, I hadn't. I didn't have a thing that worked for me, but I'm always in the process of finding the thing that works for me,
Mhm.
and I didn't think that was it.
Mhm.
And I didn't mean to take that out on my girl. Like I didn't mean to be a dick to her, and I still feel like a dick if I say it now.
Mm.
Like I still feel like I feel guilty for coming at her thing.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, when you say something that worked for you, that you were looking for, that you're kind of still like always kind of in the
Hmm.
process of looking for, like what does that mean?
Well, like I I burn my stuff. I burn my sage, my Palo Santo, my copal. I I sit in silence where I mean it's boring. Yeah, I'm the chairman of the board on that one. But I mean I have my just my spiritual practices because at the same time all of that stuff's so not guaranteed. And
Mhm.
that's the same thing we were talking about, like, oh, I'm not going to tell you what your meaning of life is. I'm not going to tell you why you're here on this planet. But like that's nobody can.
Mhm.
And some of these people who have these books that were also written by people, like to me, I just get it kind of pushes me a little bit away from because it's too peoply.
Sure.
And and there's just like these uh, these holy people, these sacred like idols that people looked up to, were abused by these people, and I don't want to participate in that. I want to participate in my own practice of uh, gratitude for this planet, gratitude for this life that I have, gratitude for all the things that I have and the blessings and the privileges that I've been so blessed with. That I don't I don't really think it's like God or no God, or I don't think it's like a atheism thing, or I don't think of it that way.
Right?
Everything is sacred to me. That's why I have the drum. I beat the drum. Everything's sacred. What what I started to do. I don't know if you saw it on my Twitter, that it says the spark on
Yeah,
my profile,
yeah,
because like that's that's the life I'm really living, because everything is this. I started a faction in DCW and I'm calling it the Spark, because I started to gather these people who I believe all have potential to not only get themselves to the next level, but to prove my greatness
mhm,
into getting me to the next level.
sure.
And I say, uh, in my opinion, potential is like an unlit match, and we are the spark. So that's the whole idea of like, when you said you like peppered in the word spark like 4 or 5 times in what you were saying. I was like, yep, that's my word.
Mhm. No, absolutely, man. And I think what you're describing in terms of skepticism and disillusionment with, yeah, like systems of belief or expression, or I mean worship or what not. I think that a lot of people could strongly identify with that, because one of the people a lot that a mistake that a lot of people make when they're setting goals is they set a goal for, like, okay, I want this thing, or I want this job, I want a relationship with this person, this car, whatever. And I say, look, maybe take a step back from that and think about, okay, why would I want that car? Or why would I want that relationship? Or why would I want that job? Why would I even want that salary? You know. And the answer is that really we want things because we want to feel certain things, right? So, like, I want a job because I want to feel something. I want to feel accomplished. I want to feel secure. I want a certain amount of money in the bank because I want to feel, financially secure, and I want to feel efficacious, and I want to feel maybe powerful, or whatever it is. I want a relationship with a certain person because of what I think that relationship will help me feel. But it's all about these feeling states that we actually want. It's not actually about the stuff. It's about these feeling states. And when you're talking about these rituals or these practices that have been developed kind of over the centuries, like, so your girlfriend's meditation practice, or the Roman Catholic Mass, or whatever. These are all kind of evolved because groups of people in parts of the world found that these rituals or these practices helped facilitate a feeling state for them. But what I hear you saying is that, look, I have a slightly different, conditional history. I have a slightly different neurochemistry, right? And so the feeling state that this facilitates for her, it's just not clicking for me. And we each kind of have to find. That's why I say, don't fall in love with your goals, right? Like, get really clear about what you're looking to feel, but then be super flexible. It's actually an old Tony Robbins formula. It's like where he says, look, get very clear about what you're looking to feel, but be super, super flexible about what you imagine or what you'll accept might get you there. Because what you're describing with the spark
Mhm.
sounds to me, just as you describe it, Like it sounds to me like a profoundly spiritual thing. Like, I mean, you're talking about in the context of the business and whatever, but we're really talking about the spiritual. We're really talking about the non-material, because you're not talking about something that can necessarily be measured in terms of salary or advancement or whatnot. Like you're talking about the evolution of the fulfillment of potential.
Mhm.
Not just for you, but like I think it's super important that you contextualize in terms of like, well, they're helping me get there as I'm helping them get there. Like there's something about that mutuality and that exchange that I think is essential to who you are. Like I can sense that just in how you run your podcast, and like how you reach out to people. Because look, anybody can have a podcast. Okay, Lord knows we don't need another white guy with a podcast of him talking to himself. Like you could just choose to do that, but you choose to do it another way. You choose to reach out to people and have this kind of free flowing exchange. Like most podcasts won't even do that. Like most podcasts, like one of the reasons why I asked for topics is because like I get asked to do a lot of podcasts. They're like, okay, we know you're the trauma guy, talk about this. You're the self-help guy, we're going to talk about this, right? You're like, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, well, I think we're cool enough with each other that we're gonna have a good time and we'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. But I think it speaks to who you are and what you both crave and get out of relationships, right? That free flowing is really important to you. Like it's like I think of it like, to use yet another wrestling metaphor. Like you could take it to the difference between the way, say, World Wrestling Entertainment heavily scripts most of its promos and these kinds of things versus All Elite Wrestling, famously kind of gives their performers a little more kind of flow, right? And granted, it helps when you have performers like Chris Jericho and CM Punk who are really good at that kind of thing. But I kind of think of you as kind of like, again, like that flow and that give and take is very important to you. And it's a practical thing for your podcast, but it's also a spiritual thing with you as well.
Right. I mean, something since you brought that up, only going to say this because you brought it up. I've been saying for years on the wrestling podcast, like how badly the boys need the business back. Like the control of the business needs to be given back to the men and women who are out there doing it. Because if like they have the personal stakes, like they're like, oh well, if I mess that up, whatever. But if it's something they came up with and it's that important, like that's why some of my segments and some of my matches are so important, because I came up with it. Some of the moves and some of the spots, they're all carefully crafted, and that's why I think about with comedy. That's why I like comedy so much, because I've crafted this just as if I've crafted the pro wrestling matches, because it's like I want to be great at those things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying I am. I'm not. I'm just saying I know I'm getting good, but it's all an evolving process.
You bet. You bet. Ownership of our efforts is really important. There was a psychologist named Nathaniel Brandon who had a theory of self-esteem. In fact, he was in the I think it was in the 60s that he was one of the first to really consistently use the term self-esteem. Like we hear it all the time now. But Nathaniel Brandon was really one of the first guys to write a lot about self-esteem. And he had his theory of self-esteem says that self-esteem has two big components. And they both have to be kind of working for you to have high, sustainable, realistic self-esteem. Like the one component is what he called efficacy. Like, so you have to believe that you're capable of doing the stuff you need to do to be a human in the world, right? Like, so we're not going to have high self-esteem if we view ourselves as basically incompetent. Mm-hmm. And the other part of self-esteem, according to Brandon, was kind of this feeling of deservingness, like this idea that, look, at the very least, I don't deserve to be punished. Like I'm as deserving of a good life as anybody else on the planet, right? So it's hard to have high self-esteem if we don't feel like we can do stuff and live life. And it's hard to have high self-esteem if we don't feel like we deserve to do stuff and live life. And what I really hear what you're, when you talk about ownership of one's work product, whether it's in comedy or wrestling, you could take it to anything, right? You could take it to psychology, you could take it to writing, you could take it to anything. But, it really speaks to like our work output in a lot of ways. If we've built a life and a career around following our joy, following our bliss, following our values, right? Our work output is necessarily going to reflect our sense of both efficacy and deservingness, right?
You brought up Wayne Dyer earlier.
Yeah.
And I have this quote from him that I always mention. And he talked about ego.
Yeah.
He talked about ego and referred to it as edging God out, breaking ego, edging God out. And I started thinking about like if that is in his mind or in anything, if that's where holier than thou comes from, like that whole saying the phrase holier than thou comes from an ego being so big that you've edged God completely out. You're holier than.
There's a whole history. So one of the things that I'm really interested in, so I'm Catholic, and one of the things that I'm really interested in is the history of the Catholic Church, especially the saints. And there's a whole tradition, the Benedictine tradition, that talks a lot about that. Like, so Saint Benedict, who started the Benedictine order within the Catholic Church, really believed that most of our problems come when we have refused to, he would say that most of our problems arise when we get this idea that we know better than God, and you don't have to just, like in our current context, when it's God, we can say spirit, universal intelligence, whatever.
The creator,
right?
The creator of this all.
Like Wayne Dyer would probably say creation itself. Like he talked about creation as Wayne Dyer talked about creation as like the ocean. Like it's so vast and has so much volume that we can't even imagine. And by the way, when we want something from creation, he's like, like we think that we're asking for so much. Really, we're taking a little cup and we're scooping a little bit of water out of that vast ocean. Like there's so much water there we can't even imagine it. Right. But when we're in our ego, we think that this cup is like huge, right? Because if we think we're this important, we can't possibly imagine this big, vast ocean. In contrast, Wayne Dyer talked about that stuff a lot. Like one of his big shticks was he had a whole thing called "Getting in the Gap." I don't know if you're familiar, but he talked about it was a kind of a combination meditation technique / life philosophy, where the metaphor he used was, look, what really creates, and this, I think this is an old Zen metaphor. It's like, what really creates music is not the notes, but the space between the notes, right? The gap between the notes. Like, what's the difference between a B flat and a C? Well, there's space there, right? Like, in order to go from a B flat to a C, there needs to be some, even the briefest moment of silence there. And he says, like, getting in that gap is really where we can find not just peace and centeredness, but that's really where we find our creativity, and that's really where we find our joy. And he talked as an example of getting in the gap, like he would use, like you could use a Christian prayer, like you could use like the Our Father. But the idea is between the words, because what are words except for these noises that we make with our face, right? They really mean nothing if they're divorced from the space between the words. And he'd say, okay, so as you say this prayer, I want you to get in the gap between the words, right?
Pay attention. Pay attention in between the blinks, as Satsang would say.
Very much. And he'd say that's where you have space, where ego is not even a thing, right? Because what is ego? Ego is us putting our bullshit out there. It's us talking. But the space is where there is no ego.
It's a funny. I just tried this on stage this week. It's brand new, and I'm just working it out at this point. But I try to talk about, um, I talked about like the spaces in between jokes, in between laughter. That's the scariest part to be inside of when you're on stage and you got a good laugh from the first thing, and then the next thing gets no laugh. It feels like, in a movie when the bully's been picking on a bunch of kids, and then they're like, "All right, we're gonna team up. We're gonna team up, and we're gonna take him on. He's not gonna hurt anybody anymore." And then the guy in the front's like, "All right, we had it with you. All right, we had it with you. Standing up to you." And he's like, "Oh yeah, you and what army? Me and these guys, right, guys?" And then there's nobody there. That's what doing a joke on stage and no one laughing at it feels like.
Yeah, yeah. I
And
can only imagine. Yeah.
and also, when doing that joke or just trying that, crickets. Crickets.
Of course, right?
I was like,
Naturally, of course.
so sure. I'm like, "Oh, right, guys."
A really good example of what you're talking about, honestly. Steve Allen wrote a book titled Funny People, and it was about kind of these old school vaudeville comedians, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he writes about like Jimmy Durante and Milton Berle, and one of the guys he writes about is Jack Benny, and he gives as an example of Jack Benny. So Jack Benny started out, as a lot of these guys did, as an old radio guy, which meant that his timing had to be really on, because look, I mean, it's all about the rhythms, and it is all about the space between whatever, like on the radio.
We just take it back to wrestling real quick and say the JR constantly says maximize your minutes.
There you go. Absolutely.
Maximize your minutes, bro.
And the example that Steve Allen gives in this book that I really love, that I looked up the bit later, because I mean it's a relatively well known Jack Benny bit. But his comedy, a part of his comedy persona was that he was cheap, right? And so the entire sketch is he's walking home. Jack Benny is walking home at night, and a stick-up guy, school stick-up guy, comes up, and he's got the gun pointing at his ribs, and he says, "Okay." He says, "Don't move. This is a stick-up." God, he says, "Okay, your money or your life." And the entire joke is there's this long pause because he's cheap and he doesn't want to part with his money even when a gun is in his ribs, right? And the crowd, the live studio audience starts laughing, even though a joke hasn't been told. Like, all there is silence. It's a gap, right? But the longer he draws it out, right? But the gap is the joke. And then finally the stick-up guy is like, "Come on, buddy. I said your money or your life." And Benny exasperately says, "I'm thinking it over." But the point is that again, that joke doesn't work if it's just a joke. Like if it's just your money or your life, I'm thinking it over. It only works because there's that gap. So I think you're very much onto something there.
That gap would make me so uncomfortable. I am so uncomfortable in those gaps. I cannot. In wrestling too, the same thing. In between the moves, in between the stuff I'm wanting to do, in between getting crowd reactions from moves, I'm so uncomfortable, and I'm like, am I bombing right now? That's right. This is like something I've had to like build up comfort, because I know in the first years of wrestling, they give you 5 minutes. They give you, for me, I mean, at least giving you like 5 to 8 minutes or something like that. It's always like, I don't have enough time to get over everything I want to get over, and I have to rush through it to make sure it's correct. And it's a balance I'm just now finding. And it's funny, a couple of days ago I just said it, that I don't think I was a good wrestler until after I came back from the brain surgery. Like, I didn't have confidence. Like I didn't until that. And it's weird that somehow turned me into a better wrestler. Like I don't know how, but like it's like that. I was like right before it happened, right before I had to go out. It was like I was getting pushed everywhere that I was working into a higher level, like to where I'd start being main events on shows, and then it got cut off, and I came back and I learned how to be a main eventer, and that's not something I don't think that's something anybody told me that was what I was going to do. I don't think that was something that I knew that I had to do, but I felt like I was in the gap of that. You know what I mean? I
Sure.
was inside of the gap of that, and that's still like why I said those uncomfortable silences that still happen. And I think the the weird part was I had this promo when I the first night I won the DCW championship, like the main belt, the main event belt.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I I was incredibly emotional from other stuff that was going on in the world, other circumstances surrounding that match, and I got on the microphone and I was saying something like, "This has been incredibly emotional day, incredibly emotional week, and I wanted to I wanted to uh, say how grateful I am to you guys for not giving up on me and that kind of stuff. And for sure, I didn't get those points out correctly, but I took a second in that silence and go, "Wow, it's so cool that it's so silent in here and everybody's listening." And the second I said that, a fan in the audience screamed, "No one cares!" And then I had a breakdown. I had a real breakdown where I I charged towards the fans and I had the microphone in my hand and I said, "Fuck you, buddy. I've been working my ass off. Who are you? You're nobody. Fuck you. Get over here." And then they took the belt from me. They stripped me of the belt because
Oh
it was a
man.
family show. But it was
Oh
like that those silences
yeah.
are something that I'm still working on, trying to not feel like I'm standing up to a bully by myself.
Yeah, you bet. You bet.
That
There's a form of therapy called dialectical behavior therapy that is used a lot in the treatment of borderline personality disorder. And it has DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, has a lot of its roots in kind of the that old Buddhist philosophy of radical acceptance and sitting with something that's uncomfortable, right? And I mean, one of the reasons for that is, people who have borderline personality disorder tend to be really um, anxious, impulsive, and that's so they do self-harmful things a lot. So, like what DBT tries to teach us how to, like, okay, I'm going to radically accept without judgment, without trying to change it. Like, I'm going to just be here with these feelings or these self-destructive impulses and not do anything with it, right? Like I'm not going to allow my urges or my feelings to bully me into doing something that would be destructive. So I think that sense that you're describing, that silence is like it feels like, like I'm here on my own confronting a bully, kind of that bully in a larger existential sense. Like sometimes there's an actual bully, but kind of in a larger philosophical sense, that bully can be conceived of as our habits or our impulses, our pain,
our campaign.
yeah, our campaign, so to speak, our expectations, right,
Yes, yeah.
or others' expectations, or whatnot. So there's a lot there. Like, what also occurs to me though is, I mean, speaking of good old JR, one of the things that he's constantly talking about is like what makes the difference between the really, really great performers and those who will never quite make it is they know how to sell and
And how to feed a comeback.
and how to feed a comeback.
Yeah. Yeah.
But selling is something that
Do you know what that means? How to feed a comeback?
yeah,
Yeah.
because sure,
Okay.
so you get heat, right? Like the heel gets heat on the baby face, and then like the heel then allows himself to get his butt kicked as the baby face comes back. Convincingly feed that comeback. But the point is that when JR says that, look, I mean, the art of selling, I imagine that's something that like, and I've never been a performer in the ring, so I don't know, but I can only imagine that that's the kind of thing, that's the kind of gap that's uncomfortable to be, because you're not doing anything proactive, like you're literally like reacting, right? And you're also in danger. I'll put that in scare quotes of looking weak, because like by definition, if you're selling, you're getting your butt kicked.
Well, like also the one of the main issues I've always had is people saying that I look like I'm stupid, or people insulting my intelligence in some way. But when I'm up there and I'm holding a microphone and I'm saying stuff, like I, I'm dreading in the moments someone saying that I'm stupid or that I'm coming across as stupid or something like that. That's a thing that there's a really really funny thing. I stopped wearing T-shirts on stage that would people would think were funny or great shirts or something, because people would talk to me after the set about the shirt I was wearing and not about the jokes I was telling. And I was like, oh, that's a real funny shirt. I'm like, yeah, but what about the jokes I just did?
How about the finely honed craft that I just displayed,
Yeah,
and took a risk and explained to.
I hadn't been working on this shirt on other mics. Nope, it wasn't trying this shirt out.
Just kind of honing my shirt game.
I give credit all the time to this Philly comic. His name is Joey Doc, Joe Doherty. He started real young. I remember being at shows with him, at mics with him. He was only like 17, 18 years old, and he did a bit where he said when he got off stage, someone came up to him and said, "Hey man, you're really brave. You're really brave up there." And he goes, "Yeah, I was going for funny."
Thanks, but
so I always contribute that to contribute that when I talk about the shirts. I'm not gonna wear a shirt that says "Oops, I crapped my pants" up on stage and then be like, "Ah, that was a funny sketch." I think it was the last time I wore a Patty's Irish Pub shirt to a comedy thing, and someone said something to me about how funny Always Sunny in Philadelphia is, and I was like, "Shut up!" And I have to like find a way to depersonalize people's comments about whatever shirt I'm wearing.
Yeah.
Like I was wearing a Dunder Mifflin shirt.
Yeah.
And and I went to 7-Eleven, and the guy was like, "Hey man, that's a funny show." And I was like, "Thanks." I had nothing to do with it, but thanks. Thanks for noticing. I'll tell all the other writers on that show that the guy at 7-Eleven said good job.
Or I'll put a different spin on that. Or maybe he was trying to connect with you as a fellow fan of the show.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's absolutely what he was trying to do, and I derailed it.
Here I just gave you all these compliments about how you like to connect and give and take and whatever. Like, screw you. It reminds me, I mean, it coincidentally enough, and I swear this actually happened. Like, I mean, it's relevant to the kind of the interest that you and I share in pro wrestling. But but it happens to be relevant to what we're talking about. I was in an airport years ago, and I was wearing an old style Macho Man t-shirt. You remember, like the purple with the sunglasses and
Yeah.
whatever. And the TSA screener stopped the entire line. Like as I was going through, like she stopped the entire line. She looks at my shirt and she says, she goes, "That was an entertainer." It's just like, and in that moment, because like like wrestling shirts are the kind of thing that like if you know, you know, and if you don't, you don't, and what you're gonna do. But just in that moment, I was very viscerally aware that we were sharing an experience as fans of Randy Savage. So that's what I think about when someone that's a funny shirt. Like he's looking for a human connection, Corey. Let him connect. Open. But you said a moment ago that you struggle with kind of that letting people in, kind of letting.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I'm.
That said, it's super like what you were saying. I want you to know that I hear what you were saying immediately before that. That is, it's super obnoxious when you've worked hard to hone a bit and whatever, and the only thing they remember is the stupid shirt that you were wearing. Like that's obnoxious. Like that sucks.
I tried to say like, oh, if you're gonna take anything, I'll always throw that into something that I think is like pretty important for me to say. Like I don't only do jokes to do jokes and get laughs. I want to say some stuff that's important. So I want to make sure I say, if you take nothing else away from this, make sure you take this, and not what funny shirt I was wearing.
Right. What's so of the things that you try, like the important things that you try to say, kind of in your act, like if you could boil them down to like kind of the take home message that you want your audience to take away, like what kinds of things that do you want them to take away?
Same thing with managing expectations. Managing expectations, and sometimes I'll say a thing that I'm like, oh, I hope that next time somebody experiences this, they'll think about me doing this bit. Even if they don't remember it was me that did it, they'll just be like, this guy did a thing and he said that.
Yeah.
So it's a little legacy. It's a little legacy issue that I probably have, but it for sure it's important. I think there's importance inside some of that, but I think a good amount of times when people come to see comedy, they're not ready to hear the important stuff. That's why those silences get me so much, because I go, this is important for you to listen. This is important for you to pin this for like later. Oh, we're like, oh yeah, that reminds me of this time this guy told a joke that fell flat and you heard crickets. Oh,
comedy has a lot. I mean, I don't know anything about the art form or the industry or whatnot, but it occurs just as you're speaking. Like it occurs to me that comedy has a lot in common with what I was talking about a moment ago of hypnosis and hypnotherapy. Like, so the essence of hypnotherapy is I have these suggestions, like post-hypnotic suggestions that I'm going to weave into this, what we call an induction, a hypnotic induction, where I will do things like either a guided relaxation thing, or I'm going to tell stories, or I'm going to use metaphors or whatever. But so there's the one thing over here, that's the actual thing I want you to take away, the suggestion. But then there's this other thing that I'm doing over here that's going to kind of keep you entertained or keep you distracted or keep you otherwise focused, so that it's not exactly trickery. Like I'm not trying to disguise the suggestion, but I'm also trying to kind of create a bifurcated experience, so that it's not just I'm hitting you over the head with a suggestion, or I'm just entertaining you with the story and the metaphors, et cetera, et cetera. And I mean, comedy, it occurs to me, is kind of the same way. Like I was thinking about this the other night. A few friends and I went to see here in Chicago Patton Oswalt, who is, I mean, really, as best I can tell, again, I don't really know anything about the art form, but he seems to be a kind of a master of exactly what we're talking about. And so far as, I mean, yeah, man, like he'll talk about when you boil it down, some really existentially important things. I mean, he's got social justice messages, and he's got like humanity messages, and there's a guy who's had real tragedy happen in his life. His wife passed away, and not. But talk about a honed skill of kind of weaving that into this material that will make you laugh regardless of kind of what your politics are and what your life experiences and whatnot. I just have a real respect for kind of that skill set. Talk about also a guy who can really use those pauses, like really, really has no problem making you wait for that next beat.
The Bill Burr special when it got quiet and someone screamed out "woo!" and he's like, "I'm okay with silence. If it's not good, don't do anything, and I'll move on."
I just had a memory that, again, I'll tell you, I wouldn't tell many people about, but again, since we're both wrestling guys, WrestleMania 4. So I was a real little kid, and it must have been in 1988, and it was the WrestleMania where they had just done the big angle with Hulk Hogan losing the title to Andre the Giant, who tried to sell it to the $1 Million Man, and they wouldn't allow that. So if the title is vacant, they're having a tournament for the title. So anyway, I was a real little kid, but it was kind of the first year or so that I was really into wrestling. And so my dad,
Macho Man Honky.
So Macho Man won the tournament that year.
Mm-hmm.
And the year prior is the match that everyone remembers, like so WrestleMania 3. The year prior was
Steamboat, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But the final of the tournament was Savage DiBiase. But anyway, my point is, I was a big fanboy at the time. I was a big fanboy. Can't believe I'll admit this on the podcast. I was a big fanboy of Strike Force, Rick Martel and Tito Santana, like the ultimate white bread baby face.
That's
nothing
to be ashamed about. There's no shame there.
A fifth grader thing to be into. But anyway,
well, I had Strike Force sneakers that were Kmart brand sneakers that made me think of Tito and Rick all the time.
There you go. Anyway,
go ahead.
Then they broke my heart at WrestleMania 5, but that's a different story. But my point is that so they had the live event in Atlantic City, but this was in the day when pay-per-view was still kind of a pain in the ass, right? You had to go down and get the equipment and rent it and blah, blah, blah. So instead of doing that, my dad took me to see it at a closed circuit venue.
Like a movie theater or something?
Yeah. And it was really great. It's one of my best memories of childhood because you had a bunch of local wrestling fans and cheer at, and it was great. But my point, the reason why I'm remembering this is we're talking about pauses and silences and the cutting of promos and whatnot. There's a famous promo during WrestleMania 4 where Andre the Giant is being interviewed by Bob Uecker, and it's the promo that he ends with kind of putting his hands around Bob. Mm-hmm. But there's the leading up to that, like Andre, this is his first couple of years as a heel, and Andre had really gotten good at kind of this intimidating, he like stare into the camera and with his big, deep French voice, kind of you can't understand a word he's saying, but it's intimidating, and the theater had gone kind of deathly quiet as Andre was giving his promo. And it was a really good promo. Like it was, again, kind of this intense. One guy in the audience in our theater breaks the silence, like Andre's talking, but this one guy breaks the silence, goes, "Fuck you." And everybody burst into like cheering. Now that's, talk about being uncomfortable with silence, because again, things have got really quiet, and this guy just kind of broke all this tension. But what I love about this memory is this is a thing that no one's going to remember unless you happen to be in the WrestleMania 4 closed circuit viewing in Des Moines, Iowa in 1988. Right? So me and like 50 other people have this memory. Fuck you.
So do you remember the movie Angels in the Outfield?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
It was Danny Glover and Tony Danza was like a pitcher.
Yes.
Tony Dan and Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Christopher Lloyd.
Oh, yeah.
There's a part where it gets like super quiet. Like there's no soundtrack or anything. It's like they're like Tony Danza is about to pitch a ball and it gets like super quiet and it's like packed theater. And my friend, as soon as it got all quiet, and it was quiet for a while, my friend just went. I really want to watch that movie again just to make a fart noise in that silence.
I love it.
But,
well, listen, I have one question. Like we've been going for a couple hours, and we should probably wrap it up. But I have a question, and it has to do with expectations.
Well, I was gonna actually give you the floor here for a second to ask me anything on the record that you'd want the answer to.
That's good because I've got it. I've got it.
Here you go.
And we're gonna go after one of the demandments of Corey Mania, Castlemania, which is manage expectations. So when we spoke last time, so I came. The only reason we know each other is because you wanted, and I'm not going to say anything mean here. I'm not going to say anything negative. So don't worry. Mm-hmm. The only reason we met each other is because I noticed that you had tweeted at James Arthur Ray, and you'd said you're kind of a dream podcast get for me, and I of course had to interject myself into the conversation, like he's a heel. Have me on instead, and we did. Right. But after that, so you had me on, but then after that, you actually got James Arthur Ray as a podcast guest, and I got to say he defied my expectations. I didn't think he would do it. One, because you had me on, but also because again, like he kind of has a track record, like you had said, like my podcast is small potatoes, and so he proved me wrong. He defied my expectations. So having interviewed James Arthur Ray, who is a big get for you, tell me kind of what that was like. What was that experience like we all saw the podcast. I know what you talked about, etc. But what on a personal level, what was that like for you?
It was just a small checkpoint thing. It wasn't like I didn't think it was I never thought. I think going into it, it was such a pain in the ass to set up, and it was such a pain in the ass to get it to and it was a tough read. And he it seemed like he kept making a smiley face, but he wasn't smiling. It was like I would talk and he'd go like he was listening to me and smiling at the same time. So I was like, am I giving a poor interview here? Like what's going on? He was like, and then I'd laugh because I thought he was laughing, and I was like miscommunicated. Like I didn't think that. Like it felt like a lot of the stuff that I was like real easy flow with easy going, go with the flow kind of way, and I think that maybe his expectations were that it maybe be more professional. I don't know. Mm. But yeah, it was cool.
So you think he thought it
was cool to be able to say I did it. It was cool to be able to say that I dreamed of doing something and I did it. It was cool to say that I wanted a certain guest and I got them, but it didn't serve me in the way I wanted it to serve me, I guess. Like, it's not like he promoted it in any way. It's not like, it's not like I got any new listeners from it, but it's cool because he was a guy on The Secret and The Secret was important to me. Not to say that it was bad. For sure, it wasn't bad, but it was just like confusing.
Mm-hmm.
And I probably got made. Maybe I made something out of it that there wasn't, as far as like maybe feeling like I wasn't respected. Maybe that's something I created, but that's also like an ever flowing narrative that I have in the back of my head is I'm not being respected, like because I don't have an audience. Because I mean, I have an audience, sure, but not a large audience, not one that's mainstream enough for people who I want to be guests to actually be guests. Like I reached out to Chris Jericho's agent, and I said that's like a huge dream guest, and she wrote me back and was like, what's your downloads? And I told her, and she was like, yeah, let us know when you get more numbers. You're not a big enough deal. Like, and I really, man, I felt like such a piece of shit on the bottom of a shoe. Like, and it's like, what? Take a listen to the show. Tell me if you think it's bad. If you think it's bad, that's one thing. But if you think you're just gonna easily push it off as being not a big enough deal because not enough people know it exists, I was never a big TV star in wrestling. Not yet. It hasn't happened. But I'm continuing to beat the drum. That's why I got the drum here, because this is ceremony for me. This is important for me. This is the record that's going to be kept for the rest of my life. This is a legacy shit. Like, this is going to be the shit that people come back to when I'm not here anymore, to hear what I was really like, because I'm not putting on a show. I'm not gathering notes. I want it to be as cool as I'd want it to be if I was a listener of it.
Yeah.
I'd want my show to be a show I'd listen to if I wasn't me. Just like I'd want my life to be like my life is if I wasn't me. If I looked at me and I'd go, man, I'd want to be a pro wrestler who was doing stand-up comedy and also podcasting. Regardless if no one's hearing the tree fall, no one's hearing the drum beat. That's the part of the structure that I'm struggling with. The part of the structure that I'm struggling with is the fact that, like, we're also doing the wrestling podcast for like we're doing it for 7 or 8 years, and my co-host, the guy whose show it is, Rick Connor, my best friend, I was the best man at his wedding. He was like, no one cares. I'm just gonna walk away from it, and it's like I don't want to wrap my worth up in who cares or who doesn't. And it would be great if more people cared, for sure. Like, that'd be rad. I'd really like that. But my self-worth should not be affected by somebody not caring. Because what's their show? Is it as good as mine? What title belts have they held in wrestling?
Well, I mean, it gets wrapped up. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? Like it gets wrapped up in, like, there are, to produce art of any kind. Like there's art for art's sake, and kind of the joy and the satisfaction and the growth and everything that you get from creating the art. But there's also kind of that piece of like, well, okay, I also would love if this art was appreciated. I mean, it's the old conundrum of the indie wrestler who's putting on amazing matches for 20 people in the bingo hall, because like on the one hand they can take a lot of pride in that, and it gives them joy and whatnot, but on the other hand, like man, how amazing would it be to actually have that be seen and appreciated? And it's important to kind of make that distinction that, okay, there's gratification on both ends. Take away, by the way, like we shouldn't like famously, it was one of CM Punk's big gripes that, okay, like, look, I was being watched by millions of people every week, but I didn't feel like I was doing this great work that I did when I was in the bingo hall in front of 20 people, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's important to really be clear about those two sources of gratification. So I mean, I hear that. I hear that.
Something I've been calling it.
So the reason I asked about say it again. Something you've been calling it.
I said this is breaking my heart. We're having a little bit of a connection issue.
I've got you back now. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Well, I was saying it's just that I've been addicted to the drug of validation for far too long, and the validation that would come from people hearing and respecting the amount of work I do and who I've been to get where I'm at right now. It's weird because it's almost like I might as well put a note in a bottle and throw it in the water. That's kind of how sometimes I'll feel, and sometimes I'll feel like it's a tree falling in the woods, and sometimes I'll feel like, man, I just tweeted something that's such a great joke. Like, I just tweeted something that's such a great joke, but nobody cares because I don't even have like 600 followers. Like on Twitter, they don't follow me. But then once they do follow me, I'm criticized for everything. So I gotta strike that weird, strange balance. But the thing is, not all comes, I think, with effort. I think that comes with that, because if somebody wanted to like look at stuff I've said and hold it under a microscope, I want to go, all right, well, you've had to make the effort to download my show and listen to the whole thing to find something problematic. Maybe, hopefully, inside of that, you find something that's useful to you, and apply that, hopefully. And if you don't, the same as in my comedy, later on something comes up and you're like, oh yeah, somebody did bring that up to me before, or I did hear that. And the same thing with like, I want everything to serve every other thing. So my comedy, people go, oh, in his comedy, he talked about how he was a wrestler. Oh, let's check out his wrestling. Oh, he does comedy. Oh, and a wrestler. Oh, let's check out his podcast. And then so on and so forth and what have you.
Yeah. And again, I think that's possible to kind of scratch all of those itches to the extent that we kind of keep in perspective that, we don't control other people and other people's reactions. Like there's so many things that go into other people's reactions. Like, so I'll just give you for an example. Back in DC, one of the things that before I moved to Chicago, one of the things I did in my therapy practice in DC was I was working with specifically with men who were having difficulty in relationships, like starting relationships, meeting women. I mean, it's kind of trying to do a more respectable version of pickup coaching, right?
Oh, like incels?
Yeah, we don't like that word, but
Well, yeah, I'm. You know, what's so funny, and I'll throw
uh,
this real quick out there.
yeah,
There's this documentary that I watched about incels, and and I I watched it with my old roommate, and we laughed our asses off. And then my coach came over. My coach came over, and he watched it with us, and he laughed so hard that he fell out of the chair in the dining room, and we thought he was dead because there was no noise coming from him. He because he was laughing the kind of laugh where you can't breathe, and then he went,
mhm.
and then he fell on the ground like hard, and no sound was coming out. But also that's has in no way any way a jerk way to make fun of incels. I don't want to do that because I was an incel as a kid for
It's
sure.
rough, man. I mean, I think when like when you find yourself at a certain life stage and you haven't had great modeling or reinforcement with social skills and self confidence, it's tough stuff. But something that we hit a lot in doing that kind of work with men who are trying really hard to get better at meeting women and forming relationships and like how to talk to women and whatnot was a lot of my guys carried into the project this attitude that, well, man, this is entirely about me, like how talented I am, how good looking I am, how smart I am, how funny I am, how desirable I am. And the first step to being really successful with being able to talk to women, generally speaking, I mean, there's no magic formula, but one of the first steps that people who tended to be successful tended to grasp was this idea that, man, there's so much going on in the mind and life of somebody else, whether it's a woman you want to talk to at the bar or an audience member at a wrestling show, that 70 to 80% of their reaction is going to have to do with the state they're in at the moment, what's going on in their life, their history of what they find funny or attractive or like whatever it is. Like there's so much that's out of our control that we really can't internalize their reaction to us as a judgment on us. Like, I mean, and to a certain extent, it's a judgment on some aspects of the interaction we just had, but it's truly not an evaluation of us. And I used to tell my guys, my dating coaching guys, I used to tell them, look, your goal is to turn this into a numbers game, because like the more women you talk to, the more you literally increase your odds of running across somebody who's in the right headspace, has is even open to your approach, like is in a position to maybe get to know you, et cetera, et cetera. And I would say the same thing to you, that something you're doing that I really respect is the fact that you're, even though your audience may not be where you want it to be right now, like you're still putting material out there, because like the more material you put out there, the more you run, you increase the chances that the right person will run across it that will be ripe for the shtick that you're laying down. I mean, again, like it's coincidence. Like what kind of a coincidence is that you and I would have ever met, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And that only happened because you were out there tweeting at James Arthur Ray, right? So
I was applying the law of attraction.
you, you were better than James does anyway. So again, I won't be mean to James. I will tell you just real quick this story to maybe put some of your experience with him in perspective. I gotta say, I'm sorry that you felt that you were maybe not being respected in that interaction
But
with
that
him.
could, like I said, that could have been something just in my head.
Sure, sure,
That once again, when it comes to managing my own personal expectations,
sure.
that's fully on, probably on me. Like if you were to talk to James and we'd be like, oh, what was it like talking to Corey? He would probably be like, oh, it's fine. Like I
Sure.
mean, I don't think he would have had anything bad to say.
Sure. Sure.
But
I
I
think
mean, I think maybe he might. I think he might have no sold some of my jokes, But
Who
but
would know? Who would know sell your jokes?
uh,
Boo!
boo! Quit
Boo!
no selling my jokes, you jerks.
um, it's really funny is using wrestling terms with people who aren't familiar with wrestling terms. It's
Oh
like,
man,
man,
yeah.
you really no sold that one. Like, sell it, sell it. Anyway, sell it, Vince. Sell that stunner. Um, no, like I can tell you, like so. I used to be a big fan of James. Like if you've listened to the podcast Guru from Wondery Media, we'll throw that plug in there. It's kind of the story of James and how he came to be and the tragedy that happened in Sedona, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm interviewed on that podcast, and I kind of tell the story that look, I was a big fan of his even after the tragedy happened. And this is something that I think James himself doesn't understand, that I was still in his corner and kind of rooting for him after that happened.
Right.
And he and I were Facebook friends, and he got out of jail, and he was trying to kind of slowly rebuild his empire. And I sent him a private message just saying, look, while you were in jail, I went to graduate. This is true. While he was in prison was the time that I was doing graduate school for psychology. And I had gotten licensed as a psychologist. I said, look, I know you're just out of prison. You're trying to make it work again. If I can ever do anything to help, let me know. And he was very cool to me. Like he was like, oh yeah, thank you for the kind words, and then we'll be in touch. And then the messages kind of turned, like we would message back and forth a little bit, but it was turned like he's like, hey, he says, I'm having this workshop. If you really want to help me, you can sign up for this workshop. I'd be like, several $100 to $1,000. And it became kind of clear what he was into, right? Like it became
that was money motivation. Like
right,
that's not very. Oh, you want to help me? You'll spend. That's not really helpful. That's just trying to. That's like trying to sell tickets to the show that you're on to your friends, like or like trying to make them buy candy for some candy sale at your school. Like that's not like, oh, you're seriously helping me with this, because you can find 25 other suckers that join you on your. I'm sorry, I'm not saying that being on that. I'm comparing suckers to buying candy from a big sale at school or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, the point being that I think James, this is just my observation of his behavior. And again, I'm not going to go down a dark rabbit hole here, but I think he has a vision for what he wants his career to be like. And I think he's kind of, I mean, I know he's angry and disappointed that he was kind of at that height of whatever and had kind of that long fall. So I think that he views opportunities now through a very narrow lens of how can this help me rebuild. And so that might have been a little bit of what was going on there, is that he himself, because like your podcast, like we've been talking like 2.5 hours, we've wrestling and comedy and interesting things about the universe and life, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think James is the type of guy who values that. Like I think he values like a really focused, like, okay, how are you going to help me sell my workshop? And so that might have been a little bit of what was going on, but I was happy for you. Like I know when I in fact I messaged you when you got him as a guest. Like I'm like I truly was, because I knew it was something that you wanted. Like I knew it was something that you had been looking forward to, and he was a dream podcast guest. So congratulations on getting it done, man. Like that's I respect that.
Dude. Thanks, dude. Next step, Chris Jericho.
Next step. You know what, Corey? We will manifest that. We will make that happen. We will attract that.
What? I have a couple of dream podcast guests, and I actually have a ton of them. But it's funny that some of my lists of people that I wanted to have on the show, to like have on the record conversations with, I've got them up. I've got a bunch of them. Yeah. Like I gotta be proud of that more than I gotta be proud, more than I gotta beat myself up about the fact that, like, oh, I got this person who's like a name and a dream guest. and then that episode may have got like 30 listens on it or something. You know what I mean? Like, oh, nobody cares. I'm stopping.
No, you're again, man. I really respect and appreciate the fact that I mean you because you have not had an easy road. Yeah, I mean, like in any of the careers that you're chasing down. So I mean, I really respect the fact that the spark remains strong, and you continue looking for it. Like I think there would have been a large subset of people who would have been like, screw it. But here you are, man, and I respect that. That's really
I wanna
that's that's
I'm gonna
worthwhile.
I'm gonna bring up one more time my one of my best friends I've ever had. This man named Aaron Gainey. Uh, he was in the wrestling business and he took care of a lot of people. Like a lot of people slept at his house on his couch. He really got people booked on shows that had no business being in the business, but they just had a dream and he would facilitate them with that outlet and really, really be there for them. But then they'd get a little something and then they wouldn't be there for him anymore. Uh, and like sometimes they would not reciprocate the respect at all that he gave them and they didn't even earn. And I said to him, why do you keep doing this for people? Why do you keep doing this for people? And they're going to keep on doing it. And he's like, because if I stopped doing it, I wouldn't be me.
Yeah.
And that hits me. That hits me hard when I think about continuing to beat this drum.
You bet. The drum, the drum. I will always sell the drum, man. The drum.
Good. Well, it's part of it's a part of my in ring thing now. Like I beat the drum on my way to the ring, and I just as a heel, I just made a guy. We did a match where if he lost a match to me, he'd be forced to join the Spark, and he'd have to be my errand boy. Like he'd have to be my lackey and act like he respected me. Right. And so after I beat him, I held the drum up and I was like, hit the ceremonial drum and tell me you respect me. Like, and that was all like completely on the fly. I had no idea I was going to do that. And the fans hated me for it. And kudos to Dez. I'm gonna bring it up. He teased like he was gonna hit the drum, like, and the fans were like, no, and he was like, he like did this whole dramatic. It was such a play on those folks' emotions. And you know what? It's important to me that those people will remember that night.
You bet.
So some of those people who had never been there before, who don't know wrestling, who will have seen that and been like, everybody was feeling something.
You bet. You bet. Absolutely, man. That's almost an old. It reminds me of the kind of angles that like Andy Kaufman and Jerry Lawler would do.
Yeah. It's pretty similar.
Back in the day, like because Andy Kaufman had the whole when he was wrestling women, he would have the whole thing. It's like if you can beat me, then I'll marry you right here in this ring, like as if you'd want to marry somebody who you have to. But also the bongos, like that's when you were doing the bongo earlier. I'm like, that's an Andy Kaufman bit. Like that's amazing.
Well, I'm a huge fan of Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey is on that list of dream guests.
Oh yeah,
dream hangs for sure. But him playing Andy Kaufman and hitting those drums was somehow inception in my brain. I'm gonna say what was he saying in the movie when he was hitting the drums? Yeah, I'm gonna start screaming some of that stuff he was doing.
There you go.
Abu dabu dabu
Abu Dhabi Dhabi Abu Dhabi Abu Dhabi Abu.
But I got two or three more quick things, and I'll send you off into the sunset with a hot dog and a handshake.
Be a veggie hot dog. I'm a vegetarian.
Okay.
Be a soy dog.
Be a
tofu dog. Tofu pump.
And They actually have like this this dressing you can put on it. It's made from trees
Hmm.
and it's vegan. It's fully vegan. It's called branch dressing.
Oh, hey-oh, hey-oh. He's on fire tonight, kids. I'm getting the A+ material here. Like this is amazing. It's
But
amazing.
uh, so any I know I already told you you can ask me or tell me anything you want. Uh, is there anything else to that you'd like to say to me or ask me on the record?
Corey, to be honest, you in this entire conversation, you have been exactly who you are. And what I mean when I say that is like I would expect nothing. Like I was excited when you contacted me to be on the show again because whenever I have a conversation with you, I never expect anything other than we're going to talk for like 2.5 hours and we're going to go all through the known universe. And there's going to be, no moment where I think, this guy's working me. Like there's never going to be a moment where like this isn't work. This isn't him.
This sucks.
It sucks.
Hear how quiet he is in between the time he doesn't seem like he knows what he's going to ask me. Oh, this guy's unprofessional.
This guy.
How many times are you going to say so in between stuff? How many times are you going to say like? What are you just trying to get your point across? Keep interrupting me.
So I understand that the point of asking that kind of here at the end is like, okay, like so here's the real stuff. But you've been giving me the real stuff for the last couple hours. So I am once again honored and thrilled that you gave me this opportunity to be present with the greatness that is the Castlemania. So nothing springs to mind, but that's only because you've been so real with me for the last couple hours, man.
Do you remember that? Thank you, by the way. Also,
You're welcome.
very, very welcome yourself, and I'm glad you feel seen, heard, and safe hanging around and chatting with me, and that
Yep.
and can tell that there's no real agendas. It's just that I know that I thought we'd have a really fun episode,
You bet.
and I was right.
You bet.
I managed my expectations correctly. Do, do you remember the audio time travel, that bit that we did the last time?
Remind me.
Okay, so this stuff's all outliving us, man.
Oh, I do. Yeah. Okay,
The-
but
the-
keep going though. Yeah, I do remember.
so on the record, I'm going to tell you how grateful I am for your friendship. I'm grateful for all the nuggets that you get to keep dropping on me, like knowledge and it's like you have a way of taking something that I'm just saying or thinking and going, here's where it's been researched and here's what the evidence is. And here's the stuff that you can turn it into applicable resources that have been there and have worked for other people. So I'm grateful to that. Very, very grateful to that. And I I might have said it last time. I hope it's a little more clear this time. I'm excited about this still just being the beginning of our friendship, and whatever it turns into. I'm always here for you. You call me anytime. Even if you just need a friend, for your if you ever feel like you got nobody, you got me.
Nice.
And how much I appreciate the effort. Like there's so much currency inside of the effort,
You bet. You bet.
like so much intention, and the fact that you were like, yeah, we can go 3 hours, whatever. Like that's so cool, and that goes back to and I'll make this point just to kind of put a bow on that whole thing. This goes back to the talking about something that might have upset somebody. It's like you'd have to go through all of it. So that would mean you'd have to pay a lot of currency of effort to find a thing. And that's why I say the stakes are pretty low. Like I don't think somebody like James Arthur Ray would take the time to listen to the whole 3-hour conversation to find maybe a little piece of me saying I felt weird about something. Like
Yeah,
that's it's not gonna be. I mean, maybe it will be, but I doubt it.
sure.
You know what I'm saying? And I'm just glad that you've got the equity.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
That touches me, man. I appreciate that. Thank you,
so
and back at you. I mean, of course.
thank you,
Yeah,
thank you.
like something I'm really big on telling my patients is that, like in your personal life, um, look, we all have relationships that we don't have a lot of choice, right? Like we all have bosses, we all have people that we have to interact with. So to the extent that you can, make those like whatever subset of relationships in your life that you get to choose, make those choices ruthlessly. And I tell people that, like I'm lucky enough to right now be in the position of like, look, I can be very picky about not only who I work with in a therapy context, or like who I work with in professional context and seek safely. But I think everybody has the right and the responsibility to be super picky about who they let into their head and heart when it comes to friendship. So I mean, I don't interact with people that don't add value. And this friendship is no questions asked. I mean, there's never a point where I'm like, that guy, the drum, God,
He probably wants something from me.
probably right.
He probably wants some kind of rub off of my social media presence.
Give him the rub. That's right.
But is there anything the people who love you the most find this recording uh, 20 years from now? What are the major takeaways that you're giving them in order to help them be a better version of themselves tomorrow as they are today?
That's easy. Something that I would want them to know, though, anybody unearthing this in 20 years, and hopefully we'll have done our episode 666 by then, so there will be even more material to root through. But, look, right now it's 2022, and we know things. Like, I've got to orient this toward behavior change and emotional recovery because that's kind of my wheelhouse. But we know things in 2022 about the brain, the nervous system, how behavior changes and is maintained. Like we know things now that we didn't know 5 or 10 years ago. Like we know things now that we didn't know when I was in graduate school in the early 2000s. We know a lot more than we did 20 years ago. And we still don't know what we don't know, right? Like there's still stuff that some people in the mental health field thinks is impossible. That in 20 years, you guys who are listening to this now are going to be like, can you believe they didn't think that was possible? Like, can you believe that that's the world they were living in? Right now, 20 years hence, so in 2042, there is stuff that the world and the mental health field are going to tell you is impossible. Like there is stuff that they haven't figured out yet. And especially the scientific establishment likes to think that they know everything, and they'll communicate to you that they know everything. They know what's possible. Don't believe them. What I mean when I say that is not, disbelieve science. I mean, look at that evidence. That's what science is. Look at that evidence and take it for what it's worth and follow best practices, etc. But remember that the science of your day, the psychological and behavioral health science of your day, doesn't know what it doesn't know. Mm. So don't fall into like this despair of like, look, I've tried the most empirically verified treatment for my PTSD. I've tried, what they say I should try for this, and it hasn't worked. That doesn't mean you're hopeless. That doesn't mean you're broken. That doesn't mean that that next year they won't crack that code. So again, we don't know what we don't know, and the field of psychology in particular, because psychology pretends to know things about how our mind works and what really motivates us, et cetera, et cetera. The field of psychology is sometimes reluctant to admit that we don't know what we don't know. So do not lose hope. And also remember that, look, whatever you, like if somebody knows me, they've probably found me on social media. They've probably found, like, if social media is even a thing in 20 years. They've probably found my work. They might have found my books, like, whatever it is. Anybody who, like me, who's out there, or James Arthur Ray or Tony Robbins, like anybody who's out there writing books about how to change behavior and feelings, et cetera, we have our point of view, but we don't know you, right? So take it with a grain of salt. Like don't read something I write and be like, well, boy, if he says this is this and this isn't this, I don't know you, right? What I try to do is put stuff out there worth thinking about. So I won't put it out there if I don't think it's worth thinking about. So think about it, but don't ever fall into the trap of thinking like, oh man, like this is the only way it could possibly be. Like, look, you may have a brain that's you may have a brain of the type that I've never seen before, right? So while the stuff I say might be worth thinking about, it may be more complicated for you, but do not lose hope. Do not stop trying. If you can hear my voice, it is not too late. That's a huge belief of mine. If you can hear my voice, if you're reading this, if you're listening to this, like whatever it is not too late. I don't care if you're in your 60s, 70s, 80s. It is not too late.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The way we wrap up every episode, I don't know if you remember this, but maybe you do. Hypothetically, let's say I've gifted you this show. So this show from this point on is now yours. Evolving with Glenn Doyle. This is your first episode. This is your pilot episode. Wrap it up in a pretty bow for the fans, for your new fans, your new listeners of your podcast, and give them some valuable takeaways from what we've chatted about. And then after that, do your best Norm Macdonald impression and say "Be fun, have safe."
as if I could do an even passable Norm Macdonald impression. Can't even do it there. I don't talk like that. I want to murder you in a well. So what we've been, thank you for, first of all, if you're listening to this podcast, Evolving with Dr. Glenn Patrick Doyle, I love you. And what I mean when I say I love you is not that I'm in romantic love with you, although who knows? Who knows?
The night is young. This is the pilot episode.
The psychiatrist M. Scott Peck defined love. Now, someone's going to go back and read his book and say he didn't say that. I don't know if this is actually how he defined love. He wrote about love a lot, but one of the things that he wrote was important to love was we were willing to expend effort on behalf of another just for their well-being, not for anything that we might get out of it. But that's one of the characteristics of love. So when I say I love you, podcast listeners, Corey and I have just spent a couple hours, kind of pouring all this out because we don't know how you're going to respond to this. We don't know. Some you might have found funny or poignant or meaningful or silly.
Sell it.
Vince, sell it, Vince. Actually, sell it, Pat McAfee. Like he went up, or Austin Theory went up. That's he got hang time on that.
Yeah.
No, look, whatever you might have taken from these last couple hours, know that it came from a place of love. Like know that neither Corey nor I are going to be getting rich from this podcast. We do this because we not only took joy in its creation, like I was saying a few minutes ago, like you can take joy in the creation, you can take joy in the reception. We hope that you take joy in the reception, but know that we loved creating it for you because we love you. You're gonna find things in this podcast if you go back, like we were dropping bits about philosophy and psychology and the business of wrestling and the business of comedy and the business of psychology and the business of self-help. But know that none of those businesses would exist except for that someone found value to other people in it. Like, I mean, pro wrestling is just like you can find old tapes. I used to have a videotape of the Road Warriors. Like it was one of these AWA productions, so the production value was terrible, and it was like a compilation of Road Warrior matches. And one of them, it was bizarre. It was like these matches taped in this empty warehouse. It felt like COVID times, but this is in like the 70s, right? And there's no reason for grown men to put on tights and makeup and pretend to fight each other, except that it would give somebody else entertainment. Right? So know that we created it and all these fields, for you to derive value from and meaning from. And I truly hope that you found something in the last 3 hours to provide value and meaning. And that's the show. That's evolving with Castlemania. Now remember, brother, you got to remember the 3 commandments of Castlemania.
Invent time travel.
Time travel, manage your expectations, which is really the important one. What was the other one? It was don't overthink it. Brother. So long. Good night. Be well.
There you go. Be fun, have safe.
Yeah. That's it.
That was the close of the Norm Macdonald as a show. That song.
So good. Underrated show, man.
Yeah, the David Spade episode was my favorite, and I've watched it a few times.
Where Norm tried to punk him halfway through, he's like, "Yeah, we haven't been recording any of this. Like, this is just."
He's like, "Oh, that was all a commercial." He's like, "Wait a minute, I just said all that, and we were on break."
Test show.
Anyway, thanks so much for doing this. Thanks for everything you said. I love you, man. I can't wait till we do this again.
We'll be back, man. Absolutely.
Everybody, if this is your first time listening to Evolving with Corey Castle, go ahead and hit the subscribe button on wherever you're listening to it. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pandora, wherever the heck you find your podcasts. And tell your friends. And, that same thing goes where if you ever feel like you're alone, not a hard person to get a hold of. Reach out to me. I'll chat with you. I'm a real dude. Be fun. Have safe. Be kind to yourself. Keep evolving.
You can find me on the Twitters at Dr. Doyle Says, and on the Instagrams at Dr. Doyle Says. You can find Seek Safely at Seek Safely. That's it.
Perfect.
Later, taters.
All right. Big taters.
Big taters. Later, big taters.
Later, big taters.
But that's it. They're right there. Later, big taters.